Hello everyone, I am the Crime Teller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from, and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. Dmitry Bakshiv, 35 years old, Natalia Bakseva, 42 years old. This Russian couple lured many men and women through dating websites, then killed, ate, and processed them into frozen human meat. They confessed to learning how to kill through instructional videos on YouTube, then applying it to at least 30 victims over more than 2 decades. The cannibal couple was only caught after accidentally losing their phone, which contained an album of dozens of photos showing them playing with body parts. The shocking incident took place in the Krasnodar region, about 90 miles east of the Black Sea. On September 11, 2017, a worker on his way home from work accidentally picked up a phone. The worker found that the phone was quite new and had no password. Naturally, everyone would try to unlock the phone to see if they could contact the owner, and this worker was no exception. However, after unlocking the phone, what he saw inside scared him so much that his entire body trembled, and he almost dropped the device. The photo album contained extremely horrifying images. One showed a man taking a selfie with a human hand in his mouth, even sticking the fingers of that hand into his nose. Another photo showed the same man grinning widely, one hand on his hip, while the other tightly gripped the mutilated head of a woman. Many other similarly gruesome images were found in the phone's album. The worker broke out in a cold sweat from fear, and as he lifted his head, an even more terrifying sight greeted him. In front of him suddenly appeared a strange man, the same man in the photos, with the severed hand in his mouth. Clearly, they were the same person. The man walked straight up to him and asked if he had seen his mobile phone. The worker was so scared he almost fainted, but luckily, he reacted immediately and tried to stay calm. He quickly waved his hands, saying he hadn't seen any phone, then slowly walked away. Once he was sure he was at a safe distance from the strange man, the worker immediately ran to the nearest police station to report the case. After hearing the worker's stammered description of what he had found, the police quickly retrieved the phone for verification. The horrifying photos shocked investigators. They had seemingly stumbled upon one of the most gruesome cannibalism cases in Russian history through images on the phone. The police swiftly opened a case and began investigating to determine the identity of the phone's owner. A mobile phone coincidentally found by a construction worker turned out to be the key to solving a horrific crime. It didn't take long. Based on information in the phone, the police successfully identified the suspect and tracked down his address, which was a dormitory at a local military aviation school. The phone's owner and the dormitory resident were identified as Dmitry, 35, and his wife, Natalia, 42. This couple was married, and both were working at the military aviation school at the time. The police quickly arrived at their residence for a search, where they uncovered a truth far more horrifying and gruesome than the photos on the phone. Upon searching the house, authorities found countless disturbing pictures hanging on the walls, photos of men and women of various ages and ethnicities. The only thing they had in common was that they were all dead and no longer recognizable as humans. As the police thoroughly searched the couple's residence, investigators found 7 bags containing body parts, 19 pieces of human skin, and boxes of human remains in the refrigerator and basement. Additionally, they discovered a container filled with unidentified body parts preserved in a saline solution. More human remains were found in the basement and around the dormitory. Inside the house, they also found multiple mobile phones belonging to the victims, as well as video tutorials on how to cook human meat. The police continued into a small, cluttered room, where scattered photos lay across the bed. One chilling photo showed a severed human head placed on a plate, surrounded by oranges and olives. In front of the microwave, they found what they initially thought was a wig, but when an officer picked it up, they realized it was actually the scalp of one of Dmitry and Natalia's victims. Disgusting, horrifying, barbaric. There were hardly any words to accurately describe the scene in that room. The police had never encountered such a grotesque crime before. Some murderers kill brutally, but at least their circumstances evoke some level of sympathy. Meanwhile, this couple committed atrocities so incomprehensible that no one could understand their mindset, let alone accept what they had done. Dmitry and Natalia were immediately arrested and taken to the police station for investigation. Based on the evidence collected from the horrifying house, the police estimated that the couple had murdered and eaten at least 30 people. Sitting in the interrogation room, Dmitri was shown the gruesome photos of himself posing with human body parts. Yet, he showed no fear or remorse and outright denied his crimes. Dmitri claimed that the bodies found by the police were ones he had randomly stumbled upon while wandering in the forest. He said he had merely carried the corpses home, taken some pictures for fun, and kept them as souvenirs. As for his wife, Natalia, she also proved to be a tough-minded criminal. She insisted that she was mentally ill and that all the brutal murders were carried out by her and her husband while they were in a daze. Of course, the police did not believe this blatant lie from the female murderer. They immediately arranged for medical professionals to examine her mental condition. The results showed that Natalia was completely sane. In fact, even her husband, Dmitri, had no psychological disorders. This indicates that their acts of murder and cannibalism were entirely premeditated and carefully planned, not impulsive or uncontrollable actions. Ultimately, faced with undeniable evidence, the couple stopped resisting and confessed the entire truth to the police. When confronted with the photos found by the police, the couple showed no fear or made any excuses. Natalia even proudly identified about 30 victims in the photos, naming them and linking their images in life to the gruesome pictures. These names were confirmed to be individuals who had gone missing in Russia since 1999. Initially, they only browsed violent and gory websites, but the more they watched, the more fascinated they became, eventually turning what they saw into reality. They often targeted single men or women through social media platforms. Each time they chose a victim, they would first use ether or a Russian drug called korvalol to knock them out, then drag them home, kill them, and eat their flesh. Besides eating the victims themselves, Natalia also distributed a large portion of the meat at her workplace. Police feared that Natalia might have even fed human flesh to cadet pilots at the Krasnodar Military Aviation Academy, where she worked as a nurse. For the past decade, people at this school had unknowingly consumed human meat. The couple's last victim was a young waitress who had agreed to meet them for drinks one evening. However, Natalia became jealous when she noticed that Dmitri seemed to like the girl more than she had expected. Enraged with jealousy, Natalia left the room, and Dmitri decided to kill the girl with a metal rod. He and his wife then dismembered her body to dispose of the remains. This was when the couple took the horrifying photos that the construction worker later discovered on September 11th. When the police asked Dmitri why he committed such a monstrous act, he simply replied, "I just did something stupid." Looking back at the couple's past, most would agree that both of them had deeply troubled histories. They seemed like a couple destined for each other, in the worst way possible. Dmitri Bakshiv was born in Krasnodar Krai, a region in southern Russia, and life was never kind to him. When he was just a few months old, his biological mother sent him to an orphanage. The exact reason was unknown, but it seemed she was a single mother unable to raise him. Dmitri spent the first 3 years of his life in the orphanage before being adopted by a couple named Svetlana and Vladimir. For the next 12 years, according to records, Dmitri was a well-behaved child. People remembered him as quiet, introverted, and someone who didn't seek attention. But at 15, tragedy struck again. His adoptive mother passed away from cancer. Her death completely changed his adoptive father, who became violent and short-tempered, and soon after, he kicked Dmitri out of the house. Naturally, young Dmitri was completely unprepared for adult life. He hadn't finished school, had no job, and no means of transportation. At first, he wandered around neighbors' homes, but no one took him in. Within a year, Dmitri became homeless. Desperate and angry, he committed a robbery at a local store and stole a car to escape, but he didn't get far. Dmitri was subsequently sentenced to about 1 to 2 years in prison. During his time in prison, no one visited him. It was a bitter truth. Inside or outside of jail, Dmitri was completely alone. After his release, Dmitri found work in construction and rented a small room to live in. Although he rarely drank, he often hung around heavy drug addicts, spending most evenings in bars. But no matter how hard he tried, Dmitri couldn't make friends. He had never had a girlfriend until he met Natalia. Natalia was 7 years older than Dmitri. She was raised by her mother and grandmother in southern Russia, but like Dmitri, she lost her mother at a young age. At 19, Natalia enrolled in medical school and became a nurse. Within a few years, she was promoted to head nurse in the sanitation department of Krasnodar. Later, Natalia was transferred to a prestigious military aviation school for pilots, where she met her first husband, a military officer. They married quickly, and Natalia gave birth to their first son at the age of 23. But this was just the beginning of her misfortunes. Her husband passed away when their son was still a child, plunging her into grief, which she coped with by turning to alcohol. Her situation worsened to the point where she could no longer hold a stable job. Over time, Natalia lost interest in life itself. She voluntarily admitted herself to a psychiatric hospital, claiming to have manic disorder. But after multiple examinations, doctors concluded that she had no mental illnesses and discharged her. Jobless, without medical support, and with no motivation to change, Natalia continued drinking heavily, spending her days in bars, where she eventually met Dmitry. The two instantly connected. After only a few months of dating, Natalia invited Dmitry to move in with her and her son. For Dmitry, this was a turning point. After years of loneliness, he finally had a home. 5 years later, Dmitry and Natalia got married. Natalia's son lived with them during this time. However, it didn't take long for their lives to spiral downward again. Natalia drank more and more, and her son, ashamed of his mother's chaotic lifestyle, decided to leave home. Devastated by her son's departure, Natalia decided to move to another city with Dmitry for a fresh start. What they did after relocating would send chills down the spines of even the bravest individuals. When news of the cannibal couple broke, everyone was shocked, but perhaps the most terrified were their neighbors. The neighbors had often noticed strange smells coming from Dmitry and Natalia's home, but they never imagined that the couple next door was actually cannibals. Neighbors described the couple as friendly, always greeting others and apologizing if they ever caused any inconvenience. However, they were particularly struck by the man's body odor. It was so foul that everyone assumed he never bathed. We may never know what kind of trauma Dmitry Bakshiv experienced in his life, or whether he was inherently disturbed, but regardless of the reason, he had to pay for what he had done. Since Russia's criminal law does not include the death penalty, this evil couple would spend the rest of their lives in prison. In 2019, Natalia was sentenced to 10 years of hard labor in a penal colony, completely isolated from society. In this facility, prisoners not only had to endure extremely harsh working conditions, lacking basic amenities and forced to work without pay, but they were also subjected to strict surveillance and isolation, so extreme that they felt abandoned by the world. Unfortunately, she was only convicted of inciting murder, not first-degree murder. As a result, Natalia was released after serving just a year and a half. This sparked even more controversy and debate over whether the punishment was truly proportional to the horrific crimes she and her husband committed. Meanwhile, Natalia's husband Dmitry faced a harsher fate. He was sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security prison. During his imprisonment, Dmitry not only endured the harsh conditions of prison life, but also underwent psychological treatment in an attempt to reform his twisted personality. However, on February 16, 2020, Dmitry succumbed to complications related to diabetes and died in his cell. Strangely, the only thing he left behind was a detailed drawing of actress Audrey Hepburn, a detail that further fueled public curiosity about his final thoughts and emotions. Shortly after the cannibal couple case was closed, the evidence photos taken from Dmitry's phone were unexpectedly leaked online, immediately causing a global media frenzy. The gruesome and terrifying images sparked a wave of speculation. Some people believed that Natalia had once sold canned human meat as a macaw product, while others speculated that Dmitry had distributed this horrifying food to restaurants in Krasnodar. The police quickly launched a thorough investigation and soon debunked these terrifying rumors, finding no credible evidence to support them. However, many unanswered questions about the case remained. One lingering theory that continued to stir public debate was whether the couple had truly acted alone. How could they have murdered up to 30 people over nearly 2 decades without anyone discovering their brutal crimes? Some even suspected that Dmitry and Natalia might have been part of a secret cannibalistic organization operating in southern Russia. However, if that were true, why didn't they expose the entire group in exchange for a reduced sentence? This remains a mystery. Regardless of their true motives, the actions of Dmitry and Natalia Bakshiv were more horrifying than any horror movie. It is unimaginable what nightmares their victims endured, as well as the immense pain and trauma their families continue to suffer. This case left the public, as well as those following the story, in shock, raising countless questions about the limits of human evil and the flaws in the justice system at the time. Case 2. The beautiful party island of Koh Phangan. Thailand is known for its famous full moon beach parties that attract thousands of tourists each month. However, in 2023, it caught people's attention for a completely different and sinister crime that took place. On August 3, 2023, around 6 a.m., the early morning tranquility was disrupted when a startling scream pierced the silence. A female worker at the local garbage dumping site, the Koh Phangan Waste Disposal Center, had stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Amidst the heaps of discarded party remnants, she discovered human remains in a bag. Shaken, she immediately notified her manager. These garbage collectors, mostly low-income Burmese immigrants, sifted through the refuse daily, hoping to find valuable treasures discarded by society, tourists, and partygoers, items they could exchange for cash. What initially appeared to be discarded meat turned out to be a human hip. The manager promptly contacted the police. Within the hour, a swarm of police and media descended upon the site. The discovered remains included hips, forearms, legs, intestines, and male private parts, all left in the Koh Phangan garbage dump. Upon initial investigation, it was determined that the man had passed away less than 48 hours ago, as indicated by the rigor mortis setting in. Additionally, the degree of decomposition suggested the fresh phase, where the body still appears relatively intact, but has started showing early signs of decay. The remains were those of a Caucasian man, leading the police to suspect he was likely a tourist visiting the island for the renowned full moon parties. Finding a dead foreigner in a city or country so heavily reliant on tourism is bad press, and they wanted to determine what caused this and solve the crime immediately. They wondered if they could locate the area or location this particular garbage came from that morning. The manager of the dumping site informed them that every morning, garbage from the entire Koh Phangan came to this site. This was a dead end, the final stop. Facing a dead end but undeterred, the police waited for forensic analysis and a DNA profile to establish who this person might be. They also scrutinized missing persons reports that might point them in the right direction to solving this mystery. Before we continue, don't miss the conclusion. There is an unexpected motivation for this crime that was only known to the close friends of the victim. And if you're fascinated by well-researched true crime in storytelling format, then be sure to like this video and subscribe to Crime's Anatomy for more intense cases from around the world. Hit the notification bell so you're always in the loop. Let's go! The next day at the same landfill, a plastic bag was found containing a bloody t-shirt, shorts, underpants, and a receipt for purchases at a supermarket called Big C. Their unexpected break arrived on the same day when a foreign tourist walked into the island's police station to report his friend missing. He said his friend, Edwin Arrieta, a 44-year-old Colombian national and plastic surgeon, had been out of touch for a few days. The officers, well aware of the ongoing investigation, looked at each other as if they knew what the other was thinking. Was this just a coincidence, or could the body parts found at the dump belong to this missing person? As the man providing information on the missing persons report identified himself, it became clear that this was no ordinary case. Daniel Sancho Burchelo, a 29-year-old YouTube celebrity chef and the son of two popular Spanish actors, was the one standing before them. Daniel had arrived on the island a few days earlier on July 31st, 2023, for the full moon party. He said he last saw his friend Edwin on the evening of August 3rd. From this account, police were treating Edwin's disappearance as a separate missing persons incident. The body parts they discovered yesterday were on the morning of August 3rd, whereas Daniel reports said he last saw his friend that evening. With thousands of tourists entering the small island each day, it was very possible these were two unrelated or independent incidents, and they had to treat each case separately. Police asked Daniel to trace back his events on the island, which he gladly recounted. Upon arrival on June 31st, he rented a motorcycle and made his way to Pambangman Hotel, where Edwin had rented a room for them under his own credit card. 2 days later, on August 2nd, Edwin arrived and Daniel picked him up around 3 p.m. and took him to the hotel. That evening, they went to the beach together, but Daniel lost sight of Edwin and hadn't seen him since. Daniel explained that he was reporting Edwin's disappearance as he was unable to establish communications with him, despite leaving messages and a voicemail, and due to Edwin's sister reaching out to him to report this to the police, which we will examine in more detail in a moment. During questioning, the police noticed suspicious scratch marks on Daniel's arms and found it strange that it took him so long to report his friend missing. Following his version of events, they reviewed CCTV footage along his route. Daniel did arrive on July 31st, rented a motorcycle, and checked into the Panbangman Hotel. The rental and hotel were paid for using Edwin's credit card. Now, recall that receipt found at the dump with the bloodied clothes mentioned previously? These were coincidentally discovered on the same day Daniel walked in to make a missing persons report. Well, the detectives found something very interesting when examining the CCTV footage at the Big C supermarket from when the purchases were made. On August 1st, 2023, the day before Edwin arrived, Daniel was seen buying bleach, cleaning agents, cutting tools, and garbage bags. They didn't disclose this information to Daniel right away, as they wanted to establish his version of events and keep this ace up their sleeves for later. Then on August 2nd, CCTV shows Edwin waiting for Daniel. Daniel picks him up from the pier, and with Edwin sitting behind him, Daniel is seen riding the motorbike, presumably to the hotel. But instead of taking Edwin back to his hotel, Daniel seemed to be heading in a different direction towards a different villa 28 kilometers away from where Edwin was supposed to be checked in, called the Hat Salad Resort. The clothes Edwin was seen wearing as he sat behind Daniel on the motorcycle were the same ones found on August 4th at the garbage dump, another link suggesting Daniel knew more than what he was letting on. Edwin was never seen alive again. Edwin Arrieta was a successful Colombian plastic surgeon. According to his friends, his career was incredibly important to him, and he frequently traveled to places like London and Buenos Aires. He loved horse riding and a variety of sports. Recently, he had shown an interest in moving to Spain, which we will explore in a moment. Edwin was a devoted son and brother, and took pride in taking care of his parents and sister. In fact, it was his sister, Darling Arrieta, who first raised the alarm when Edwin stopped responding to her messages on August 2nd. Worried, she started calling some of his close friends and learned about his relationship with Daniel. She eventually obtained Daniel's Instagram handle and began messaging him right away. Here are some of the messages exchanged between Darling and Daniel once she got a hold of his Instagram account around August 4th. From these messages, you can see she's extremely worried about her brother and wants to know what's happening. She asks Daniel, but is so surprised when he tells her that he lost touch with him. She doesn't believe they were on a beach together, but he left her brother alone. Daniel tells her that they took some mushrooms, but he was out of it, that Edwin thought there was something wrong with him, and that's why he didn't answer him. She finds this incredible and implores him to call the police. Daniel agrees, offering his WhatsApp number to her, and then tells her he's going to take a shower before going to talk to the police. That day, Daniel went to report Edwin missing. However, due to his questionable account of events, what detectives found on the CCTV footage, and the bloodied clothes matching Edwin's, and the numerous scratches and wounds on Daniel's arms, the police arrested him after his account. There is speculation that he may also have been tipped off due to Edwin's sister, but we'll get to that later. On August 5th, the police along with the forensic team went to the villa Daniel had rented. At the villa, they found numerous areas that had been thoroughly cleaned with bleach. Forensics officials collected hair, water samples, grease stains, and fragments. In the bathroom, they also found traces of blood. In the pipes, they discovered hair and human tissue. These samples were sent off for expedited testing at Jala province. Preliminary results expected the next day on August 6th. They also found $80,000 in cash and a gold chain. When questioned, Daniel was angry and claimed he was innocent, insisting they had the wrong person and that the police should be out there trying to find his friend. However, that night, DNA tests from the dump site confirmed that the remains belonged to Edwin. The next day, tests from Daniel's rental villa also confirmed the presence of Edwin's DNA. Police knew they had their culprit. Detectives confronted Daniel with the evidence linking the remains found at the dump and at his villa to Edwin, reminding him of the severe penalties for lying to law enforcement. Daniel caved and admitted he did it, but claimed it was an accident. Daniel said he brought Edwin to the villa to talk to him in person and break off their relationship. He claimed he had tried before, but Edwin just wouldn't listen. He figured if he spoke to him face to face, Edwin would understand. However, Edwin wasn't interested in talking. Instead, he wanted to initiate sex with Daniel. Feeling threatened and fearing that he was about to be violated against his will, Daniel pushed him away. This infuriated Edwin, who had come all the way and was paying for all these expenses. The shoving escalated into a full-blown fight, resulting in scratches on Daniel's arms. In the struggle, Daniel punched Edwin in the face, causing him to fall and lose consciousness. Panicking, Daniel dragged Edwin to the bathroom, splashing water on his face, but he wouldn't wake up. In shock, Daniel waited for an hour before finally panicking and deciding to cut Edwin into pieces. It took him nearly 3 hours to complete the dismemberment, resulting in around 14 body pieces. Daniel then removed the pelvis, penis, 2 legs, and intestines and separated these from the remaining parts. That night, he attempted to rent a kayak to dispose of the remaining parts in the sea. However, the kayak vendor wouldn't rent to him so late at night. So Daniel, frustrated and angry, bought the kayak for $1,000. He then paddled out several times to dump the body parts in the middle of the sea. At 10 p.m. that night, he disposed of the head. At 2 a.m. on August 3rd, he went to the dumping ground and left the remains that were discovered at the start of this episode. At 6 a.m. that morning, he made a second trip to dump more parts in the sea. Interestingly, around the same time he was kayaking, workers discovered the body parts he had dumped earlier that night. That very day, he went to the full moon beach party and had a good time. Finally, he made another trip at 11 p.m. that night on his kayak to dump the remaining parts. Detectives believed his version of events for disposing of Edwin's body parts, but did not believe Daniel's story account of what happened at the villa was simply an accident. Perhaps by being honest about the disposing of the body, Daniel believed the rest of his story would seem credible. But detectives saw through his lies. Little did he know they had discovered him on CCTV making purchases for the items used to dismember and dispose of Edwin's body well before they had this supposed fight. Also, the way Daniel rented a separate hotel far away on the other side of the island that he did not disclose to the police, took Edwin there immediately after he arrived and dismembered, and dumped him within hours using the tools he had purchased a day earlier, painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. In fact, there was overwhelming evidence now to suggest this entire trip was planned for one reason: to lure and murder Edwin Arrieta. For reasons only truly known to him, Daniel planned to lure Edwin, kill and dismember him, and leave the country before anyone was the wiser. The police have their own version of events of what transpired in the villa on August 2nd. After luring Edwin to Koh Phangan under the guise of another vacation hookup, Daniel picked Edwin up as planned, but purposely took him to a different villa than the one he had booked for his alibi for the police. There, an unsuspecting and wary from his travels Edwin was struck on the head with a blunt object, but surprisingly, this didn't incapacitate him right away. To Daniel's surprise, Edwin fought back, bravely putting up a fight against the man who had lured him with his pre-planned ill intent. The ensuing fight for his life left bruises and scratches on Daniel that were seen by the police later. Then, as planned, Daniel dragged Edwin's deceased or unconscious body to the bathroom, a location chosen for its tiled surfaces and ease of cleaning. He then methodically dismembered Edwin, using the cutting tools he had purchased the day before. He turned the bathroom into a makeshift slaughterhouse and did his best to minimize the mess and contain the blood. After dismembering Edwin into 14 pieces, Daniel placed the remains in garbage bags. He cleaned up the scene using the cleaning aids and solutions also purchased the day earlier. He wanted to dump all the remains at sea that night, but underestimate the availability of the kayak and how challenging it would be to dismember the torso and legs. He therefore improvised by buying the kayak and dumping the large parts directly at the Koh Phangan Waste Disposal Center, and assumed no one would bother searching through heaps of garbage at a landfill. Unbeknownst to him, garbage collectors always shipped through rubble, and this grim discovery was made just hours after he had left it there. Daniel's trips to the sea were also methodical. He paddled out under the cover of darkness, early morning or late night, and far enough at sea to ensure the remains would be scattered and difficult to retrieve. He would then stay the night at the villa he did not dismember Edwin at, and in case police suspected anything, there was no way to find foul play at his location. After checking out at the villa that he dismembered Edwin at 9 a.m. on August 3rd, he attended the full moon party to celebrate the relief of getting rid of a problem in his life. And then a final trip again at 11 p.m. to dispose of the remaining parts, after which he believed he had covered all his tracks. However, like most criminals who believe they have outsmarted everyone, reality said otherwise. CCTV footage played a key role in solving the crime. By establishing his intent before Edwin even stepped foot on the island, the disposal and the clothes Edwin was seen wearing when sitting behind Daniel on the motorbike established clear sequence of events of what transpired. Despite his claims of innocence, the detectives knew they had caught a cold and calculated killer. But then, why would Daniel report Edwin's disappearance to the police instead of leaving the island quietly? It turns out Edwin was incredibly close to his sister, and they messaged each other several times a day. Darling Arietta would later give a heart-wrenching interview on Colombian TV, revealing that she had suspected Daniel from the very first moment. She didn't know Daniel personally, so she had to contact him through Instagram, a connection she obtained from Edwin's friends. Darling recalls telling Edwin's friends when he stopped responding on August 2nd, quote, "We are worried. We have no information." That's when she discovered that the Spanish chef was also in Thailand with her brother. She asked him directly, quote, "What do you know about my brother?" His response was chilling. "I lost track of him on the beach." Darling's alarm bells went off immediately. Good God, how can he be your friend and not know where he is? She thought. This made her suspect Daniel from the beginning. Desperate for answers, Darling urged him to, quote, "run to the police station to report Edwin missing." But she didn't stop there. "I contacted the consul of Colombia. I told her not to let this man leave Thailand because I suspected him," she explained. The consul then alerted Thai authorities to be on the lookout for Daniel, which explains why the police were so suspicious when he came to report Edwin missing. Unfortunately, the next call Darling received was one she was not prepared for. She recalls the moment, quote, "The consul told me they had found a body. I asked, 'Is it my brother?' They remained silent. And at that moment, I knew it was my brother." Her voice broke, and she couldn't hold back her tears. It was Darling's unrelenting perseverance and quick thinking that pressured Daniel into filing the missing persons report. The tip-off from the Colombian consulate to the Thai authorities ensured Daniel was kept under scrutiny, giving the police the time they needed to collect more evidence. The DNA results that came back on August 6th confirmed that the bloody body parts and fluids in Daniel's rented villa were indeed Edwin's. But the burning question still remains. Why did Daniel do it? Daniel and Edwin's story began about a year ago. Edwin reached out to Daniel through Instagram, and they began exchanging messages and phone calls. These interactions became increasingly flirtatious over time, escalating to intimate images, sexual encounters, and dates in Spain. The relationship went beyond the physical and emotional. Edwin even invested €10,000 as they intended to start a restaurant business in Spain together. He also allowed Daniel to use his credit card for purchases. However, the relationship was complicated. Daniel had a girlfriend, Laura, whom he had been with for the last 5 years. They were planning a wedding in both Spain and Thailand. Furthermore, despite their various sexual encounters, Daniel did not see himself as a homosexual and wanted to end his relationship with Edwin. But this did not sit well with Edwin, who had invested his time, money, and soul in this newfound friendship with his sugar baby, more than a decade younger than himself. According to Daniel, Edwin couldn't let go and threatened to publish their intimate photos and videos, thus ruining his and his family's reputation. I must note that despite Daniel coming from a family of famous people, leaking these details would undoubtedly also hurt Edwin's reputation as a plastic surgeon. Furthermore, there was no evidence to suggest that Edwin was threatening to make such a move. In a shocking reveal, a friend of Edwin claimed in an interview that Edwin had lent Daniel 900 million pesos, equivalent to €216,000, to open a restaurant in Spain. The restaurant was meant for them, and they would be equal partners in its success. In fact, just a few weeks before the crime, Daniel's father had mentioned how proud he was of his son for opening and running 2 restaurants in Spain. Now we know, at least partially, where this success came from. It seems the strongest motive for ending Edwin's life was for Daniel to pocket the money and future profits of this restaurant and get rid of a problem in his life that would have otherwise tarnished his and his family's reputation if word got out of his secret sugar daddy. Furthermore, Daniel's behavior displayed no hint of remorse. The day after dismembering Edwin, and before his last kayaking trip to dispose of the remains, he attended a full moon beach party on August 3rd. What person attends a party if they are mourning the accidental loss of their dear friend? In an interview with the Spanish press, Daniel said this about Edwin. On August 6, 2023, Daniel was surrounded by police officers and toured around the island of Cofangan to reconstruct the murder of his 44-year-old Colombian lover, Surgeon Edwin Arietta Ortega. On Monday, August 7th, the judge of the island's provincial court sentenced him to provisional detention until his trial. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty against Daniel Sancho. But in August 2020, the King of Thailand commuted the death sentence to life imprisonment for a different case where a Spaniard was also involved, paving the way for extradition. It's expected the same would happen to Daniel despite the sentence being handed down by the courts. Is it fair for foreign nationals to commit crimes in other countries, but spared the sentence in those countries? Let me know in the comments. In April 2024, the charges were laid against Daniel Sancho. The charges included premeditated murder, concealment of a body, and destruction of other people's documents. Sancho pleaded not guilty to premeditated murder and destruction of documents, but pleaded guilty to hiding the victim's body. Edwin's families do not want the death penalty for Daniel, but believe he should be punished with another punishment suiting the gravity of his crime. Daniel's sentencing is pending and his trial is ongoing. Case 3. On a summer night in August, at Wat Phra Kunaram Temple in Arizona, 7 monks, a nun, and a 16-year-old worker were brutally executed by unknown assailants. Their bodies were arranged in a circle in the living room of the residential quarters, with victims suffering fatal gunshot wounds to the back of their heads. The massacre at Phra Kunaram Temple was considered one of the most barbaric murder cases in Arizona at the time. Shortly after, a group of young men confessed to killing the 9 people in the temple. However, evidence collected by the police indicated they were not the true perpetrators. Why did that group of young men confess to a crime they didn't commit? Who were the real culprits? Let's uncover the mystery behind this chilling case at the American Temple. Wat Phra Kunaram Temple was one of the very few Buddhist structures in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, USA. Life there was always slow-paced and peaceful, but everything changed on August 10th, when a local resident discovered the tragedy at the temple. Early that morning, as usual, a man arrived at Wat Phra Kunaram Temple to bring food to the monks. He looked around to find familiar faces, but saw no one, and the place was eerily quiet. Morning silence was not unusual at a temple, but for some reason, the man bringing food felt an inexplicable sense of unease. Feeling that something was amiss, he decided to head toward the living quarters to find the monks. The moment he stepped into the living room, the man froze in shock, his entire body paralyzed by the scene before him. In the room near a long couch lay 9 bodies dressed in saffron robes, sprawled across the floor. The 9 deceased included 7 monks, a nun, and a worker, all with multiple gunshot wounds. All the victims were lying face down with their hands behind their heads. The victims were arranged in a circular pattern, resembling the spokes of a wheel. The carpet around the victims was soaked in blood, as were their clothes. This was the most heinous massacre in Arizona's history, prompting the police to immediately deploy 66 officers to solve the case under the leadership of Officer Russell Kimball. Officers rushed to secure the scene and began investigating for clues. Given the shocking nature of the massacre and its potential to become an international incident, the police also contacted the FBI for assistance. They additionally sought the involvement of criminal psychology experts. No one in the county, or even the state, had ever encountered such a horrifying crime scene. A total of 17 shots were fired, all striking the victims. The victims were all shot in the back of the head at close range, each receiving more than 1 bullet, with some victims being shot up to 3 times, except for one monk who appeared to have moved slightly out of position, suggesting he resisted or tried to escape. The rest of the victims seemed to have accepted their fate without resistance. Some victims were found partially overlapping each other's bodies. A few had wounds on their arms, suggesting they were shot while praying. The scene was horrifying, and even seasoned investigators shuddered as they reconstructed what had happened to the 9 victims. They must have trembled as they watched others being shot before the killer turned the gun on them. While searching for evidence, investigators discovered an ashtray filled with cigarette ashes in the middle of the circle of bodies. 2 fire extinguishers had been discharged haphazardly inside the house, seemingly as an intentional act of vandalism. A set of keys lay scattered on the kitchen table. Additionally, the police found the word blood deeply carved into the wall. Blood was also the name of a criminal gang in Arizona. On the floor around the bodies, 3 shell casings from a 20-gauge shotgun were found, along with several shell casings from a .22 caliber firearm. The shell casings at the scene indicated 2 types of firearms were used, meaning the crime involved either 2 weapons or at least 2 perpetrators. It appeared someone had ransacked the bedrooms, yet valuable items remained untouched. Both the safe and the money tree with numerous bills attached were left undisturbed. Investigators meticulously examined every wall, window, and item in the temple, discovering over 1,000 fingerprints. However, they belonged to the temple residents and volunteers. In the temple's hallway, police found several distinct shoe prints. These prints did not belong to the monks or the nun, as they did not wear shoes. Using forensic techniques, investigators identified the prints as coming from military-style snow boots. Within hours, criminal psychology experts arrived at the scene. They worked with the collected evidence, though there was little information to extract. However, a few standout details captured their attention. First, since the monks were of Thai origin, investigators speculated the murders could be racially motivated. Another possibility was an organized crime hit, or an act of revenge, as rumors suggested. One of the monks had an affair with another man's wife. Regarding the victims, investigators learned all of them were Thai citizens, though some had lived in the U.S. for a long time. None of the victims were involved in illegal drug trafficking. The rumors about a romantic affair involving one monk could not be substantiated due to a lack of evidence. Among the deceased was the 36-year-old abbot of the temple. Most of the other monks were in their 30s and 40s, except for a 75-year-old nun and a male worker who was her relative. All the victims lived at the temple, each having a room with a single mattress on the floor and very few possessions. In summary, nothing in their past, either collectively or individually, suggested they were at risk of becoming victims of a revenge attack. They had done nothing to attract negative attention and had no known enemies. In fact, their lifestyle was healthy, and they were regarded as friendly individuals. Others associated with the temple were interrogated, but no one knew who could have carried out such a brutal act. The severity of the case prompted the Thai ambassador to the U.S. to visit Phoenix to assess the situation. The Thai government also urged the U.S. government to find the perpetrators at all costs. Social and political pressure weighed heavily on the investigation team, and the FBI quickly became involved. When analyzing the crime scene, an FBI psychological profiler noted 3 standout characteristics: disorganization, youthfulness, and recklessness, all clearly evident in the traces left at the massacre site. The investigation's focus was directed towards searching for teenagers in the area who might have been familiar with the temple or had some connection to it. To gather evidence, forensic experts analyzed the shell casings found at the scene. They identified them as ammunition for .22 caliber semi-automatic rifles manufactured by Marlin Firearms Corporation. The corporation had only begun producing these rifles 3 years earlier, meaning the guns were relatively new. Police checked pawnshops and stores to find .22 caliber semi-automatic rifles. They seized hundreds of guns and conducted test shootings, but none matched the bullets used in the murder. Hundreds of leads emerged, but the investigation team could not identify any suspects. Then, 1 month after the murders, a phone call provided the first valuable lead. Investigators received a call from a man at the Tucson Psychiatric Institute. The man claimed he could provide the exact names of those involved in the Wat Promkana Ram Temple massacre. The man gave the police his name, and then abruptly hung up. The caller was Mike McGraw, a psychiatric patient receiving treatment at a hospital about 190 kilometers from the crime scene. Initially, the police doubted Mike's story due to his mental illness, but they decided to call him back to learn more about what he had said. In the second call, Mike made a shocking admission to the police. Mike claimed he had been involved in the murders as a lookout for the perpetrators when they broke into the temple. According to Mike, the motive for the crime was robbery, not murder. He said he heard multiple gunshots inside the temple before the group fled the scene. Police were even more stunned when Mike revealed that the killers had written the word blood on the wall at the crime scene. Before allowing reporters to access the crime scene, police had removed the wall with the word blood carved into it to keep this detail confidential. Therefore, only those involved in the massacre could have known about the inscription, proving that Mike wasn't making up the story. Based on Mike's testimony, investigators identified 4 others involved in the massacre, including Mark Nunez, Victor Zarate, Dante Parker, and Leo Bruce, all of whom lived in Tucson, Arizona. Dante Parker was the only one in the group with a criminal record for robbery. Armed with this crucial lead, police and a special task force immediately traveled from Phoenix to Tucson to apprehend the suspects. To ensure accuracy, they asked Mike McGraw to accompany them to identify each individual. All 4 suspects were quickly arrested, but they adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. Despite the suspects' stubborn denials, police were confident they had captured those responsible for the massacre. They held a press conference to share the news with the media. On September 13th, the Serious Crime Task Force, consisting of 66 investigators, announced the arrest of 5 men from Tucson, 2 of whom were ex-convicts. They declared the case solved and expressed hope that physical evidence would soon link the suspects to the crime scene. The media dubbed them the Tucson Suspects. At the time, not only the public, but even the police believed they had caught the perpetrators and that the case was nearing closure. No one expected that investigators had uncovered only 1/3 of the truth behind the horrific massacre. Despite the investigators' efforts, the Tucson suspects remained incredibly stubborn, with none of them confessing to the crime. After failing to obtain initial confessions, investigators decided to adopt a new strategy during the second round of interrogations. They told the suspects that confessing was the only way to avoid the death penalty. Investigators then relentlessly pressured them with questions and extended the interrogations, leaving the suspects with no time to sleep. The interrogations lasted for hours until the suspects were utterly exhausted. Surprisingly, Dante Parker, the most defiant of the group, was the first to confess. In the following days, one by one, the other suspects also succumbed, each admitting to their crimes and providing additional details. The confessions agreed that on the afternoon of August 9th, the group traveled to Phoenix in 2 vehicles, a Ford Bronco and a Chevrolet Blazer. They then gathered and prepared their weapons in southern Phoenix before heading to the temple that evening. Parker even described a spiral-shaped ring taken from one of the monks, a detail the police had not known before. He also recounted how one monk resisted them and added that a nun entered the room where they were gathering the monks, startling him. However, the confessions, especially those obtained after prolonged interrogations, contained many inconsistencies. For instance, Parker claimed that the first person shot was the 75-year-old nun. However, when the interrogator asked about the position in which the victim fell, Parker said she was lying on her back, while in reality, the victim was lying face down. He also stated that the word blood on the wall was written with the victim's blood, but that was not the case. Finally, Parker claimed that after he finished shooting and ran outside, many monks chased. After him, in reality, no monk survived to pursue the suspects. Next was Mike McGraw's testimony. Although he said that the killers had discarded their blood-stained clothes along the roadside while fleeing Tucson, police were unable to find any clothes despite thoroughly searching every corner of the city. They also could not locate the gun used to shoot the monks. One of the suspects, Leo Bruce, admitted to using his personal gun. However, when forensic experts test-fired Bruce's gun and analyzed the markings, they concluded it was not the murder weapon. Unable to find evidence from the suspect's firearms, investigators focused on the shoe prints left by the killers in the temple. They collected all the shoes used by the suspects and compared them to the shoe prints at the scene. Once again, they were disappointed as none of them matched. However, the suspects appeared to know details about the crime that had not been disclosed to the media, making it unconvincing to argue that their confessions were based solely on information from news reports. Police remained convinced that these 5 individuals were indeed the culprits behind the deaths of the 9 victims at the temple. The confessions of the suspects and the actual events at the scene were entirely contradictory, prompting the prosecutor in charge of the case to spend a week reviewing their statements. He found that the confessions not only failed to corroborate one another, but were also highly inconsistent. This raised the question, if these individuals were not the culprits, why would they confess to crimes they didn't commit? On September 17th, one of the 5 men, Victor Zarate, was released after surveillance footage showed he was at a different location at the time of the murders. However, the other 4 remained in custody. Then, over a month passed with no new information until an incident in Phoenix on October 24th changed the course of the investigation. The Office of Special Investigations at Luke Air Force Base reported finding a .22 caliber rifle matching the weapon suspected to have been used in the Temple massacre. They had spotted the gun during a routine traffic stop. At that time, the gun was lying on the passenger seat of a vehicle driven by a 17-year-old male. After test firing and analyzing the markings on the shell casings, investigators confirmed that this was the weapon used in the Pronkenram Temple massacre. Rolando Carataccia, who had the gun in his car, claimed he didn't know the 4 Tucson suspects and was not involved in the murders. Months earlier, he had loaned the gun to 2 friends of the same age, Alex Garcia and Jonathan Doody. This new information caused the case to take a completely different turn. According to the investigation, Jonathan's father was stationed at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. When his father was transferred, Jonathan stayed behind to finish high school in Avondale, living with Alex Garcia, a classmate. Being of Thai origin, Jonathan had connections with the monks at Wat Pronkanram Temple. His mother had been a temple volunteer, and his brother had previously worked for the temple. Investigators obtained a search warrant for the apartment where Jonathan Duty lived with Alex Garcia. Both were students at Agua Fria High School and were part of the Air Force ROTC military training program. During the search, they found a Stevens 20-gauge shotgun, which was quickly confirmed to match the shell casings found at the crime scene. Thus, police now had both weapons used in the crime. Additionally, they discovered 2 knives, a camouflage hat, 2 masks, and gloves. Investigators seized 2 pairs of shoes belonging to the boys for analysis, and the results showed that the shoe prints matched the impressions at the temple. At Alex's parents' house, investigators also found several duffel bags, one of which contained military equipment. The military items were unrelated to the high school's training program, and were clearly items the boys had purchased themselves. It was likely that both boys were influenced by military aspirations, wanting to make their lives resemble those of soldiers, including viewing the world as a dangerous place that required aggression. Perhaps the massacre was merely a war game in their imagination, where these teenagers saw themselves as brave soldiers. The 2 boys were quickly arrested, but this led to divisions among the investigators. Some believed Jonathan and Alex were connected to the Tucson suspects, while others were certain that the 4 men from Tucson were innocent. A few police officers insisted on keeping the Tucson group in custody until sufficient evidence was found. They argued that the confessions of the Tucson men were credible, as there was no reason for them to admit to something they hadn't done. However, County Attorney Rick Romley reviewed the case and concluded that there was not enough evidence to detain the Tucson group. On November 22nd, the men were finally released, and the charges against them were dropped due to lack of evidence. At this point, the police focused on the 2 actual suspects, Jonathan and Alex. Initially, the 2 denied their involvement and fabricated other names to mislead the police. Jonathan described the events in an entirely different way, claiming that he and Alex were part of an underground gang. According to him, their group initially met near the Agua Fria River on Camelback Road at around 8:30 p.m. that night, and they all went to the temple to rob it. One of the victims recognized someone in their group, so Jonathan was told to leave. While he was outside, someone started shooting the monks. He claimed the crime was initially a challenge to see if they could bypass the temple's alarm sensors. However, Jonathan couldn't explain why they brought guns, knives, and military equipment. Jonathan added that the group had threatened to harm his family if he dared to tell anyone about what had happened. Of course, the investigators didn't believe this fabricated story. They knew Jonathan was simply trying to blame non-existent people. After several hours of interrogation, Jonathan Duty finally gave a true confession. He admitted that he and Alex Garcia broke into the temple to steal money and prove their abilities as future soldiers. As for Alex, after confessing, he recounted in detail what had happened on the night of August 9, 1991. It all began as a robbery plan. He and Jonathan had been obsessed with it for 2 months after hearing Jonathan's brother mention that the temple housed a solid gold Buddha statue and a safe containing $2,000. Jonathan also had his eye on a $1,000 scar parked on the temple grounds and believed that after this big heist, he could claim it. To add excitement, the duo turned the robbery into a war game. They purchased military clothing and gear, including snow boots, camouflage hats, scarves, goggles, and knife belts. Jonathan borrowed a rifle from his friend Kara Takia, while Alex secretly took his uncle's shotgun. The pair tested the weapons in the White Tank Mountains with a silencer, but when the silencer failed to work, they couldn't conduct proper practice. Nevertheless, they were too excited about their plan to abandon it. On the evening of August 9th, the 2 attended a party and then drove to the temple around 10 p.m. They scoped out the temple before barging into the living room and ordering the monks to lie on the floor. The pair arranged the victims to kneel in a circle facing one another, and for an hour, Jonathan held them at gunpoint, while Alex searched for the safe's keys and committed acts of vandalism. The monks did not resist. A short time later, a nun entered the room, and the thugs took her hostage along with the monks. They managed to steal over $2,500, along with cameras and audio equipment, but they couldn't find the correct key to open the safe. Alex said he wanted to leave, but Jonathan insisted on eliminating witnesses, meaning they had to kill everyone. Standing on a chair, Jonathan began shooting, while Alex used the shotgun to wound some victims, though he insisted he didn't kill anyone. Afterward, the two carved the word "Bloods" into the hallway wall to mislead the investigation and quickly fled. Fearing the possibility of a death sentence, Alex Garcia struck a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty early and testify against Jonathan Duty. Additionally, Alex Garcia revealed another shocking incident shortly after the Temple shooting. He and his girlfriend Michelle Hoover killed an elderly woman named Alice Cameron while she was camping near Horseshoe Lake, stealing $20 from her. The court later tried the two defendants in the Temple shooting in 1994. Since they were only 17 years old at the time of the crime, Arizona state law prohibited imposing the death penalty. The court convicted Jonathan Duty of first-degree murder for the 9 victims, armed robbery, and burglary, sentencing him to 281 years in prison. As for Alex Garcia, the court convicted him of first-degree murder for 10 victims, armed robbery, and burglary, sentencing him to 271 years in prison. Michelle Hoover, Alex Garcia's girlfriend and accomplice, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the murder of the elderly woman. At this point, a major question arose. Why did 4 of the 5 wrongly arrested individuals confess to a crime they didn't commit? Most likely, this was the result of prolonged interrogations lasting dozens of hours, during which the suspects, under immense stress, confessed. Their testimonies were inconsistent, but the police, eager to solve the case, failed to notice the discrepancies. So why did Mike McGraw claim that he had acted as a lookout for others who broke into the temple to shoot the monks and write blood on the wall? First, Mike suffered from mental illness, so he may have imagined the scenario. And what about the word blood? During his call to the police, Mike reportedly asked, "Was there blood on the wall?" It's possible that due to his unclear phrasing or a misunderstanding on the part of the officer who received the call, the police mistakenly believed that blood was written on the wall, leading them to think Mike was truly involved in the massacre. In later interviews with reporters, Mike revealed that over 44 hours, up to 30 investigators continuously interrogated and threatened him. Mike insisted he was not the person who had called the authorities. He claimed that he had entered the psychiatric center for treatment for substance abuse, and that someone else from the center had made the call implicating him. Mike said the investigators denied his request to see a lawyer, refused to let him rest or eat, and coerced him into giving the confession they wanted. Parker, the first to confess, also revealed that before his interrogation, he and the others had been placed in a room filled with charts and images related to the murders. This provided them with information to tell the investigators what they wanted to hear. Hoping to escape the harsh interrogation, they used this information in their responses. The Tucson youth later sued the police for coercion, feeding them information and denying them food and sleep to force confessions. The police had to pay $2.8 million in compensation for them to drop their lawsuits, while Mike, the mentally ill man, also sued the police and received $1.1 million in damages. The wrongful arrests of the Tucson youth and the mentally ill man highlighted the need for police to reform their interrogation methods, as their tactics had caused innocent people to confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Case 4. The terrifying story began on April 24th, when Sydney police received an emergency call from a local resident. The caller reported a horrifying scene near the fountain, along the coastline in Memorial Lake National Park. Police immediately dispatched an investigative team to the scene. Upon arrival, guided by detailed directions from witnesses, they searched the area around the fountain. Shortly after, they discovered a large plastic bag discarded in a secluded corner, containing the body of a young woman. Based on initial observations, the victim was identified as being of Asian descent, aged between 20 and 30, and approximately 170 centimeters tall. Police and forensic experts noted numerous severe injuries on the victim's body. Knife wounds were visible all over, particularly concentrated on the chest and abdomen, indicating the killer had acted with terrifying aggression. The victim's head also showed significant trauma, suggesting she had been struck with a hard object, such as a stick or rock. Additionally, there was a deep cut on the woman's neck, about 4 centimeters deep, which was determined to be the direct cause of death. These signs clearly indicated this was neither an accident nor a suicide, but a murder. Investigators believed the victim had been brutally killed before her body was left at the location. However, the body had been submerged in water for an extended period, erasing most critical evidence such as fingerprints, the killer's DNA, or any signs of assault. This made the case more complex and raised even more unanswered questions. So, who was this unfortunate young woman? Why had she become the target of such a brutal murder in a park frequented by many people? Recognizing the severity of the case, Sydney police quickly launched a comprehensive investigation. Investigators immediately searched databases for missing persons in the area to find clues about the victim's identity. They carefully analyzed the characteristics of the body, including estimated height, gender, and age. The process of cross-referencing the data was urgent and meticulous. Police also thoroughly examined each case, comparing physical descriptions and distinctive features like tattoos or body marks. Despite their best efforts in utilizing all available resources, investigators found no matching results in the first hours of the investigation. It wasn't until the next morning that a couple approached the New South Wales police station to report their niece missing. According to their statement, their niece had been out of contact since April 20th, leaving them extremely worried and anxious. Zhang Fong, the aunt, recounted that her niece, Lung Mengmei, was an international student at the University of Technology, Sydney, pursuing a bachelor's degree in Australia. Zhang's husband also stated that Lung Mengmei was not the type person to go missing or fail to inform anyone of her whereabouts. When their niece disappeared, both were filled with unease, believing something terrible had happened. Could the missing girl be the unidentified body found by police near the fountain? Upon receiving the report, police immediately went to Zhang Fong's home to collect personal items belonging to Lung Mengmei for DNA testing. The forensic results showed that DNA from Mengmei's belongings matched the DNA found on the body discovered at the fountain in Manoring Lake National Park. Later, Zhang Fong, Mengmei's aunt, directly identified the body at the police station and confirmed it was her niece. On the morning of April 29th, police officially announced the victim's identity as Lung Mengmei and confirmed this was a serious murder case. During the initial investigation, police quickly focused on those closest to the victim, with the first suspect being Lung Mengmei's boyfriend. According to Zhang Fong, her niece had previously shared on social media about her romantic relationship with an Australian boyfriend. Zhang Fong stated that Mengmei had been dating this man for about 2 months before the incident occurred. The aunt also remarked that the man seemed suspicious, untrustworthy, and often displayed strange behavior, which had worried the family when they learned Mengmei was dating him. However, Zhang Fong's testimony did not convince the police, as verification results showed that the boyfriend in question did not have a close relationship with the victim. Interviews with those close to him, along with checks on his schedule, revealed that he had no clear motive or suspicious behavior related to the case. This forced investigators to expand their search and focus on other aspects of the incident. In an effort to continue the investigation, police began reconstructing the timeline from when Lung Mengmei was last seen until her family reported her missing. They followed every small clue, starting from April 21st, 2016. According to the information gathered, at around 3 p.m. that day, a classmate saw Mengmei standing in front of the main building of the University of Technology, Sydney. According to the witness, she appeared cheerful, dressed neatly, and showed no signs of anything unusual. After chatting for a while, Mengmei parted ways with her friend and left the area, saying she was going to a nearby shopping center. Surveillance footage from the shopping center confirmed Mengmei's presence there. According to the extracted video, at around 4 p.m., she was seen strolling through the stores, stopping by a drink stall, and buying a cup of bubble tea. From there, she headed toward the Kenthus train station near her residence. Notably, surveillance cameras at the station captured images of Mengmei waiting for the train for about 10 minutes. However, after that, she completely disappeared and was not seen on any other surveillance cameras. According to her aunt Zhang Fong, on the evening of April 21st after returning home, Lung Mengmei called her at around 8 p.m. Police confirmed that when Mengmei returned, only Barrett, her aunt's husband, was present at the house during that time. Based on the critical detail of Mengmei's mysterious disappearance, police decided to extend the investigation by extracting surveillance footage from around her residence. The results were shocking. No footage captured Mengmei leaving the house after she returned on the afternoon of April 21st. This raised suspicions that Mengmei's mysterious disappearance might be directly linked to someone in her household. After thoroughly examining the evidence, police quickly shifted their investigation to focus on Barrett, the man living with Mengmei. According to information uncovered by the police, Barrett was not the man Zhang Fong had dreamed of marrying. The marriage between Mengmei's aunt, who was then in her 40s, and Barrett, a 23-year-old man, was clearly a relationship based more on convenience than genuine love. Jiang Fong, hoping to secure Australian citizenship, had married Barrett to fulfill her dream. Under Australian naturalization laws, a foreigner can apply for citizenship after 4 years of legal cohabitation with a local citizen. Meanwhile, Barrett, who was a drug addict and lazy, had no interest in love or family responsibilities. His sole purpose was to take advantage of the financial support from his wife, who was 17 years older than him, to live comfortably without working. The entire family of 4 lived together in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. When Mengmei moved in, the already tight space became even more claustrophobic. In that small apartment, they tried to maintain the appearance of a harmonious family, with no visible signs of conflict or unusual behavior. Yet sometimes, such eerie tranquility can serve as the perfect mask to hide the darkest secrets. With the initial information gathered, Barrett became the primary suspect in the case, and police arrested him on the afternoon of April 29th for further investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence leading to his arrest was the phone signal data from Mengmei's device. Analysis showed that after Mengmei returned home on the afternoon of April 21st, her phone signal never left the house. This indicated that she was likely murdered inside the house, and that the perpetrator had deliberately staged a false scenario to mislead investigators. Although this evidence strongly implicated Barrett and Mengmei's disappearance, police still needed direct evidence and a confession from Barrett to charge him. Immediately after arresting Barrett, police conducted an emergency search of the house where he lived with Lung Mengmei's family. This search revealed shocking discoveries, elevating the case to a more severe level. In the bathroom and Mengmei's bedroom, police found several hidden cameras installed in a sophisticated manner. These devices had clearly been used to secretly monitor the victim over an extended period, revealing a chilling side of Barrett's behavior. Investigators then examined Barrett's electronic devices, including his phone and personal computer. Through this, they discovered a series of disturbing voyeuristic videos recorded by Barrett himself. In these videos, Barrett had secretly filmed private moments of Lung Mengmei, including when she was showering in the bathroom and changing clothes in her bedroom. What enraged investigators and the public the most was a video discovered in the memory of Barrett's phone. In the video, he was seen sneaking into Lung Mengmei's room while she was fast asleep. The footage showed Barrett committing acts of assault against his niece. With compelling evidence, Sydney police officially filed charges against Barrett, and the case was brought to trial in court on June 29, 2016. At the trial, prosecutors presented a complete and detailed sequence of evidence related to the case. From surveillance footage, videos found on Barrett's phone, to witness testimonies, everything was logically organized to reconstruct the entire sequence of events. Under the weight of the undeniable evidence, Barrett finally confessed to his crimes. According to his testimony and investigative findings, Barrett had harbored ill intentions toward Lung Mengmei for a long time. During their time living together, he often acted secretly and waited silently for the right opportunity to strike. On April 21st, after returned home, Barrett noticed that the house was completely empty. His wife was at work, and her 2 children from a previous relationship had returned to China. At that time, only he and Lung Mengmei were in the house. Seeing this as the opportunity he had long awaited, Barrett immediately began executing his sinister plan. In the early hours of April 22nd, Barrett sneaked into Mengmei's room while she was sound asleep. He brought with him a hard object he had prepared in advance and used it to render her unconscious. When Mengmei collapsed, he quickly bound her hands and feet with tape, preventing her from resisting. However, while Barrett was in the midst of carrying out his dark plan, Mengmei unexpectedly regained consciousness. Realizing the danger, she struggled and cried out for help, but this only made Barrett more aggressive. He hurriedly gagged her with a white cloth and taped it tightly, ensuring she could not make any sound. After subduing Mengmei, Barrett did not stop there, but continued to commit heinous acts against her. He used his phone to take a total of 19 photos, documenting her being bound and tormented. However, to ensure his actions were not discovered, Barrett decided he had to kill her to silence her permanently. In a fit of madness, he retrieved a knife from the house and repeatedly stabbed Mengmei. In total, he inflicted over 30 stab wounds, stopping only when she was near death. Barrett's torment of Lung Mengmei lasted more than 10 hours in the house where he and her family lived. Notably, at around 3 p.m., On April 22nd, while the crime was unfolding, Mengmei's cousin unexpectedly dropped by the house. To hide his crime, Barrett quickly dragged Mengmei into the bathroom and locked the door. When Mengmei's cousin asked about it, Barrett calmly explained that the bathroom had a bad smell and suggested she use the other bathroom in the house. Barrett maintained a facade of normalcy and stayed in the bathroom for a long time to ensure no one would discover anything. He only left the bathroom after he was certain that Mengmei's cousin had left the house. Immediately afterward, he continued his cruel plan by wrapping Mengmei's body in a large plastic bag. To dispose of the evidence, he placed the victim's body in the trunk of his car, preparing to transport it far from the crime scene to erase all traces. During the time Mengmei was missing, while Zhang Feng expressed concern, Barrett remained completely calm. He showed no signs of fear or panic, and even tried to convince Zhang Feng not to rush into reporting the matter to the police. In the early hours of April 24th, Barrett woke up very early to carry out the final step of his plan to dispose of Mengmei's body. He drove his car with the victim's body in the trunk to Manamura Lake National Park, about 100 kilometers away from the house. There, he chose a secluded area to dispose of the body, attempting to conceal all evidence of his crime. However, when he was arrested and confronted with the overwhelming evidence, Barrett tried to justify his barbaric actions. He claimed that he had consumed a large amount of crystal meth prior to committing the crime, causing him to lose control and be unaware of his actions. But police were not convinced by this excuse. They pointed out that Barrett's detailed descriptions of how he carried out the crime showed he was fully conscious and aware during the entire time. Additionally, further investigation revealed that the stash of crystal meth Barrett had purchased earlier had been used up weeks before the crime occurred. This proved that Barrett's testimony was nothing more than a clumsy excuse to avoid responsibility. The evidence from the crime scene and his own confessions further clarified the brutality and calculated nature of his crimes, rendering any attempt at defense meaningless. On December 13, 2017, the court officially charged Barrett with 22 serious offenses. These included murder, 19 charges related to secretly filming others' private areas without consent, and 2 charges of possessing illegal pornographic material. Just 2 days later, on December 15, 2017, the Australian court sentenced Barrett to 46 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 34 years and 6 months. This heavy sentence seemed to have closed the entire case, but a shocking surprise occurred in the year 2019. In November 2019, a woman living in Sydney returned to visit her mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. While chatting, she noticed her mother fiddling with a USB drive that she couldn't remember where she had gotten from. At first, the woman thought it was a harmless item, but curiosity led her to check the contents of the USB. When she plugged the USB into her computer and opened the files, what appeared on the screen horrified her to the point of disbelief. The USB contained 9 videos and 13 photos, with shocking and deeply disturbing content. In the videos, a Chinese woman appeared naked, her hands and feet tightly bound with tape, unable to resist or escape. The woman was heard repeatedly begging a white man to stop, her voice filled with despair and fear. However, her weak pleas were completely ignored. The man coldly continued to assault the victim in a ruthless manner. The images and sounds in the videos were enough to make viewers shudder at the inhumanity of the acts recorded. Toward the end of one video, an accident occurred, causing the camera to fall to the ground unexpectedly. The images became blurry and shaky, no longer capturing any clear frames. However, what sent chills down the viewer's spine was that the audio continued to record clearly. The painful screams and desperate sobbing of the Chinese woman echoed, like choking cries of ultimate terror and despair. The haunting sound lingered before the video abruptly ended, leaving an eerie silence behind. The contents of the USB not only shed further light on the hidden aspects of the case that shocked the public 3 years earlier, but also unveiled an even darker side of the crime. The videos and images served as undeniable evidence, providing crucial insights into Barrett's barbaric actions. Once the woman overcame her initial horror, she realized the importance of the USB in restoring justice for the victim. She quickly brought the USB to the local police. Upon careful review, the police confirmed that the images and videos on the USB were evidence from the Ling Mingmei case. These materials were crucial supplements, further clarifying the extent of Barrett's crimes. The videos revealed the brutal process of assaulting and torturing the victim, leaving no doubt about the monstrous nature of the perpetrator. Without hesitation, the police compiled the contents of the USB into an official evidence dossier. This dossier was immediately submitted to the court, accompanied by a request to reopen the case for further investigation and to uncover the full truth. This action was not only aimed at ensuring justice for the victim, but also at determining a more appropriate sentence for the perpetrator, whose horrific actions exceeded everyone's imagination. Through meticulous investigation and forensic examination, experts confirmed that the white man appearing in the videos from the phone and hidden cameras was none other than Barrett, the husband of the victim's aunt. This irrefutable evidence further cemented Barrett's direct involvement in the heinous crimes he committed. On December 9, 2020, in light of new evidence presented, the court decided to reopen a second trial related to this case. This time, prosecutors presented additional detailed evidence of Barrett's vile actions against Ling Ming Mei, including the images and videos he stored on his personal phone. Both the court and the public present at the trial were horrified by the level of cruelty and depravity in Barrett's actions. After considering all circumstances and evidence, the court sentenced Barrett to an additional 22 years in prison for the sexual assault charges, adding to his previous 46-year sentence for the murder of Ling Ming Mei. Thus, Barrett's total sentence amounted to 68 years in prison, the maximum penalty under Australia's judicial system for a criminal like him. However, the trial's outcome sparked considerable public debate. Australia abolished the death penalty in 1967, meaning that Barrett, despite the severity and brutality of his crimes, would not face execution. Many expressed dissatisfaction, arguing that a 68-year prison sentence was still insufficient to compensate for the pain and loss he caused. Debates about whether the country should reinstate the death penalty for exceptionally severe cases continued, making the case a hot topic not only in the judicial system, but also across Australian society. Case 5. This is a true story that happened in Madison, Indiana, USA. On the morning of January 11th, two brothers on their way to hunt birds discovered a strange object in an abandoned soybean field near Lemon Road. Initially, they thought it might be a mannequin that someone had burned and discarded, but upon leaving their car, they discovered it was a charred human body. At 10:55 a.m., the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Madison received a report from the two brothers. The Jefferson County Sheriff and detectives immediately arrived at the scene. Apart from a pair of underwear, the victim was almost completely naked, with the body burned up to the waist. The victim's legs were spread apart, arms tied up in the air, and hands clenched into fists. The victim was likely a young woman, but her chest was severely damaged, making identification difficult. The most horrifying aspect was perhaps the victim's face, completely disfigured, with clenched teeth. Shortly after, Indiana State Police and forensic experts arrived at the scene to conduct a thorough investigation. The initial assessment suggested that fire was used to destroy specific evidence crucial to the investigation. Upon examining the victim's private area, forensic experts found that her underwear had been displaced, indicating signs of abuse, possibly before or after the murder. Initially, the police suspected it might have been a drug deal gone wrong, carried out by gangs. Due to the gruesome nature of the crime scene, they believed it couldn't have been committed by local residents. However, after further examination of some evidence, this possibility was ruled out. The victim was wearing a bracelet, the type commonly worn by students of Jefferson Middle School as part of their uniform, with the initials SGH engraved inside. Not far from the crime scene, they discovered a burned and deformed plastic bottle containing gasoline. Who is this victim? Why was she brutally murdered in an abandoned field? By 9 p.m., the same day, a couple, accompanied by their daughter, arrived at the Jefferson Sheriff's Office in Madison. The couple reported that their daughter had witnessed a female student being brutally murdered. Upon hearing details related to the murder case in Jefferson, the sheriff was shocked. Coincidentally, at 1 p.m., another couple had reported their daughter missing. Her name was Shanda Scherer. Hearing that the name of the murdered girl matched the missing person, police suspected it might be the same case. The sheriff immediately called the couple who had reported their daughter missing to identify the body and provide DNA samples for verification. The shocking revelation was that the girl who came to report the crime was actually one of the perpetrators, but, out of fear, confessed everything to her parents. Another girl later also arrived at the police station with her parents and a lawyer to report the incident. The two girls confessed that their group consisted of 4 people, with the main perpetrators being 2 other girls. They admitted to sitting in the car and witnessing the entire incident, but were too afraid to intervene and save the victim. Was the body found in the field really Shanda? What had happened to her on that horrific night? Shanda's parents, Stephen Scherer and Jackie Vaught, rushed to the police station with hopeful expressions, thinking their daughter had been found. However, upon seeing the sheriff's solemn but sorrowful face, they realized something terrible had happened to their daughter. Jackie could hardly believe it and reacted hysterically when informed of her daughter's condition. Dental records confirmed that the victim found in the abandoned field was indeed Shanda. Early in the morning on January 12th, the police immediately arrested Lori Tackett and Melinda Loveless. Two strange men knocked on the door. Loveless' mother, after briefly hearing about the incident, led them upstairs where Tackett and Loveless were sleeping. The police read the arrest warrant while Tackett and Loveless were still groggy from sleep. Both were handcuffed and taken away immediately. Also on January 12th, the forensic doctor conducted Shanda's autopsy and was shocked by what had happened to her. The results showed that the victim had been tortured for about 10 hours before being burned, with her body covered in injuries. The horrifying case angered the American public, who demanded the immediate trial of the four she-devils. Despite being teenagers, the four perpetrators were tried as adults due to the heinous acts they had committed against the victim. Through the testimonies of Tackett and Loveless, the murder was reenacted in court, leaving the victim's parents in utter shock. Everything started when Shanda met her friend Amanda Heverin at Hazelwood Middle School. After an argument, both were punished, but it helped them resolve their misunderstanding and become friends. Their friendship grew, and eventually, the two girls began exchanging romantic letters and started a relationship. Amanda Heverin's ex-girlfriend, Melinda Loveless, became jealous upon seeing Shanda getting close to Amanda. In October 1991, Amanda and Shanda attended a school dance together and were caught by Amanda's ex. At this point, Melinda began planning Shanda's murder and even made public threats. Worried about their daughter dating this troublesome girl, Shanda's parents decided to transfer her to another school. However, Amanda kept trying to contact Shanda, sending letters and calling her frequently. On the night of January 10, 1992, Melinda was furious upon discovering that Amanda had lied about things related to Shanda. Enraged, she told her best friend Lori Tackett, and the two decided to pick up their friends Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence for a night out. Hope and Tony were the two girls who later went to the police station to report the crime. Melinda and Lori were close friends, while Tony and Hope were Lori's friends. The two had never met Melinda before. The girls drove Lori's car to Melinda's house and devised a plan to kidnap Shanda to threaten her. Melinda explained to the girls that she disliked Shanda because she was a copycat and had stolen her girlfriend. When they arrived at Shanda's house, the four girls were shocked by the luxurious home, something they never had due to their unstable childhoods, divorced parents, and constant arguments. Hope and Tony knocked on Shanda's door, claiming to be Amanda's friends, and inviting her to come with them to meet Amanda at the witch's castle. However, Shanda wasn't allowed to go out at that hour, so she arranged for them to return at midnight when she would sneak out to join them. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence returned to the car, which angered Lovelace, but she eventually calmed down and discussed the next part of their plan. The four girls then went to a rock concert at a nearby park. At 12:33 a.m. on January 11th, they returned to Shanda's house. This time, Tackett and Hope Rippey were tasked with picking up Shanda. After some hesitation, Shanda trusted them and got into the car. As they neared the witch's castle in Utica, Hope asked Shanda about her relationship with Amanda. Suddenly, Melinda sprang from the back seat, holding a knife to Shanda's throat and threatening her. Terrified, Shanda cried and begged Melinda not to hurt her. Throughout the drive, the jealous Melinda continuously insulted and berated the victim. When they arrived at the witch's castle, an abandoned area, Lori set an old shirt on fire for light and told Shanda that she would end up like the burning shirt. Overwhelmed with fear, Shanda could only cry and plead for mercy. Hearing a passing car, the group panicked and decided to leave the area with Shanda. Shanda begged the girls to take her home, but they refused. During the next car ride, Melinda ordered Shanda to remove her bra and swap it with Hope. After a while, the girls got lost and stopped at a gas station, hiding Shanda under a blanket. They called someone for directions to the forest near Lori's house, where they began torturing Shanda. Hope and Tony, scared, decided to stay in the car while Melinda and Lori tortured the poor girl. Later, Melinda suggested going somewhere else instead of staying at Lori's house, But when Hope and Tony refused, they were left behind. As dawn broke, the two returned to pick up Hope and Tony, and they all planned how to dispose of the victim, with Hope and Tony agreeing to go along. Lori opened the car trunk, found a bottle of Windex, a glass cleaner, and sprayed it on Shanda's wounds, mocking the girl. They drove to a nearby gas station and filled an empty 2-liter soda bottle with gasoline. Then, they drove to an abandoned field, where Tony stayed in the car while the other 3 girls took Shanda, still alive, outside wrapped in a blanket. Lori ordered Hope to pour gasoline on the victim, while Melinda set her on fire. They quickly left, but Melinda worried the fire would go out, so they returned to pour the remaining gasoline from the bottle. Shanda is officially gone, Melinda happily told the group. Lori was also pleased to have helped her friend, while Hope and Tony remained silent. They had many chances to save Shanda, but did nothing. Exhausted after tormenting the victim, the group stopped at a roadside fast food restaurant. Lori then drove Hope and Tony home. Later, Melinda called Amanda and another friend, Crystal Wathen, to tell them about Shanda's murder and arranged a meeting to prove what she was saying was true. At first, both Crystal and Amanda didn't believe what they were told, until Melinda showed them the car trunk and Shanda's blood-stained clothes. Horrified, Amanda demanded Melinda take her home and promised not to tell anyone about what had happened. Amanda kept her promise to her ex-girlfriend, despite knowing about the murder and the death of the girl she loved. Due to the sheer brutality of the case, the public demanded the immediate trial of the 4 she-devils. On March 15, 1992, Prosecutor Guy Townsend charged Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence with Shanda's murder and aggravated battery with a weapon. However, the judge ruled that the 2 girls were merely accomplices and did not directly participate in the murder. On April 9th, Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett were indicted for Shanda's murder with the highest degree of severity. By April 22nd, Prosecutor Guy Townsend agreed to a plea deal with Tony Lawrence in exchange for her full testimony against the other 3 members of the group. Although she avoided the death penalty, Tony faced a prison sentence ranging from 6 to 20 years. Many people were outraged by Townsend's compromise, especially Shanda's parents. On August 17th, Tony was found unconscious in jail after attempting to take her own life. After Tony's recovery, Judge Todd decided to transfer her to a psychiatric treatment facility in Jefferson. By April 21st, Melinda and Lori agreed to plead guilty and accept several charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. By November, Melinda and Lori were brought to 2 separate trials where they admitted to their actions. Once close friends, Lori continuously blamed Melinda during the trial, even stating that she planned to appeal and pursue a career in child psychology. On February 14th, TV reporters' vans lined up outside the Jefferson County Courthouse to cover the trial of ringleader Melinda. Many people cried as Shanda's mother, Jackie Vaught, spoke about her beloved daughter, showing photos and videos of Shanda when she was alive. "It's all over. Our lives have been shattered. I want my daughter home this Christmas. I'll have presents waiting under the Christmas tree for her," Jackie said sorrowfully. Melinda Loveless was sentenced to 60 years in prison, the maximum penalty for her age at the time of the crime. She cried loudly upon hearing the verdict. At that moment, no one could believe she was the perpetrator of the horrific crime that night. Judge Ted Todd made only one remark as Melinda was led away. "You still have the chance to live and do whatever you want after prison, but Shanda never will. Be satisfied with that." Lori Tackett received the same sentence, but showed no reaction upon hearing it. Just 2 days after the sentencing, Shanda's parents filed an appeal. The case was covered by Louisville Television, with plans to produce a film based on the tragic incident. Shanda's parents agreed, hoping their story would reach more people and garner support for their upcoming legal battle. Tony Lawrence's trial began on January 19, 1993. Tony was highly cooperative, with several teachers and friends testifying in her favor. When allowed to speak to Shanda's family, Tony burst into tears in court. "I am deeply sorry for what I have done. I know you will never forgive me. I will never find peace for the rest of my life," Tony sobbed. "I have attended 3 trials for these monsters. They all deserve punishment. The lawyers are trying to convince everyone that they were victims, but the real victim is Shanda. My daughter, no one else." Jackie responded through tears. Tony Lawrence was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and she collapsed in tears in the courtroom. Hope Rippey's trial began on June 1, 1993. Hope stated that the only thing she did to Shanda was pour gasoline on her. Hope's psychologist, Sheehan, testified that all of Hope's actions were carried out under the orders of Lovelace and Tackett. However, his statement was not accepted. Hope was sentenced to 50 years in prison. In the spring of 1994, Toni Lawrence began serving her sentence. 4 years later, in 1998, she applied for clemency but was denied. In 2000, Toni applied for clemency again, and this time her request was granted. In December 2000, 24-year-old Toni Lawrence walked out of prison after serving nearly 9 years. In November 2004, the Indiana Supreme Court officially reduced Hope Rippey's sentence from 50 years to 35 years. According to Judge Jenny Manier, Hope had shown full remorse and had the potential to become a good citizen after her release. She was enrolled in a distance learning bachelor's program at Ball State University for inmates and might be released even earlier. Shanda's mother was truly shocked by this news. She couldn't accept that those who murdered her daughter were being released earlier than expected. This had a profound impact on Shanda's family. Her father, Stephen Scherer, unexpectedly passed away at the age of 52 in 2005. Jackie stated that her ex-husband was overwhelmed with grief over their daughter's case, living in constant despair. He turned to alcohol and drank excessively for years. When he learned that the perpetrators were being released one by one, his anger grew, and he died in sorrow. In April 2006, Hope was officially released after serving 14 years. She was 31 years old at the time. In October 2007, the lawyers of Lovelace and Tackett began preparing the necessary documents for their sentence reduction requests. However, this faced strong opposition from the victim's mother. Jackie Vaught was determined not to let it happen. By late December 2007, a petition with nearly 7,000 signatures was submitted to the Supreme Court. As a result, the efforts to reduce Lovelace and Tackett's sentences faced significant obstacles and were ultimately unsuccessful. Nearly 20 years after her daughter's death, Jackie Vaught continued to live in sorrow. She agreed to appear on the Dr. Phil show for the first time in 2011. "I can't imagine what my daughter went through," Vaught told Dr. Phil. She felt heartbroken thinking about how her daughter was still alive when the 4 monsters burned her with gasoline. The grieving mother couldn't believe that mere jealousy had driven the 4 girls to commit such a brutal act against her daughter. Also on the show, Jackie Vaught and her eldest daughter faced one of the 4 perpetrators for the first time, Hope Rippey, who had been released in 2006. Jackie stared straight into Hope's face and said, "You were inhumane on that fateful night." Hope pressed her lips tightly, her eyes welling up with tears, saying that during her time in prison, she constantly apologized and couldn't explain her wrongdoings. The confrontation between a grieving mother and one of her daughter's killers on television attracted many viewers. "Let me tell you this, until you have a child, and your child is murdered the way you did to mine, you will never understand a mother's pain," Jackie said. As of 2012, Melinda Lovelace, the mastermind behind the murder, had spent over 7,000 sunrises and sunsets behind barbed wire. Few people knew that while in prison, she had found a new life as a service dog trainer for people with disabilities. For 7 years, Lovelace had become one of the most trusted and capable trainers in the Indiana Canine Assistance Network ICAN program. Melinda cared for and trained Odell, a court therapy dog for abused and traumatized children. However, a dog named Angel was unlike any other. He became an unexpected connection to Melinda's victim, Shanda. 125 miles away, Shanda's mother, Jackie Vaught, was still enduring the unbearable pain of losing her daughter. "I have always said that if you want to see someone who has nothing inside, just look into Melinda's eyes. There's nothing there," Jackie once stated. Jackie never wanted to have any contact with those who murdered her daughter. "All I ever said was that I just wanted them to serve their sentences. That's all I ever said in court," she shared. However, a breeder supplying dogs for the ICAN program in the prison created an unexpected connection. As a burned victim like Shanda, Charlie Patriso convinced Jackie to watch the latest video of Melinda in prison. Jackie was truly astonished to see the mastermind behind her daughter's murder appearing almost completely transformed. Melinda has learned how to nurture something, love it, and then let it go, just like she did with Odell in March 2011. Jackie saw something in Melinda that she had never seen before. She is very compassionate. "I think the ICAN program gave her something in life, unconditional love from her 4-legged friend, and the ability to give love in return," she said. In an astonishing move, Jackie Vaught accepted Charlie's idea to donate a puppy in honor of Shanda and let Melinda be the one to train it. Upon hearing this, Melinda couldn't believe it. It was only when she saw the puppy, Angel, running into her arms for the first time that she dared to believe it was real. That was the puppy Jackie had touched, held, and named. And I said, "Oh, this is unbelievable," Melinda recalled. Jackie faced criticism for her decision to let her daughter's killer honor Shanda's name. "It was my choice. If you don't let good things come from bad, then nothing gets better. And I know what my daughter would want. She would want this," Jackie explained. Melinda tearfully stated that Jackie's forgiveness had helped her heal and grow. "She did a good thing. I want to thank her, and maybe just saying thank you isn't enough," Melinda said. Over time, Lori Tackett was unexpectedly released on January 11, 2018, the exact 26th anniversary of Shanda's death, after serving 25 years. Before her release, Lori Tackett appeared on Dr. Phil in 2011. The middle-aged woman with short blonde hair said that if she could go back to that fateful night, she would do everything in her power to stop it. "I didn't know Shanda. I just thought I was helping my friends scare someone. It was peer pressure, that's all. Things got out of control way too fast. It was something that should have never happened," Lori said. As for Melinda, she was also released from prison on September 5, 2019, after serving 26 years. Since her release, she has never appeared in the media or spoken about the past. The case of jealousy-driven murder, where 4 teenage girls kidnapped and burned a schoolgirl alive, haunted the entire nation and has now come to a close. Case 6. The decomposing body of a young, unclothed woman was discovered in the underground garage of a bustling shopping center. When the perpetrator's identity was revealed, everyone was shocked and stunned. "I feel like she came to me not for love, but simply as a transaction." This is a true case that occurred in Beijing, China. On April 12th, a decomposing female body was discovered in the Oriental Plaza garage on Wangfujing Street, the busiest street in Beijing. Police received a report and found the victim wrapped in a quilt, wearing a light-colored shirt with her pants pulled down to her knees. The perpetrator had abandoned the victim in a Fucon car, and a foul odor filled the surroundings. Shortly after, the police identified the deceased. The victim was Zhu Yueping, a student from the Foreign Languages Department of Beijing University of Technology. The victim, a Beijing native, had a beautiful and sweet appearance. As the only child in her family, Zhu Yueping had the means to pursue her passion for fashion. She dressed stylishly, spent money lavishly, and aimed to find a wealthy Beijing-born boyfriend. So who killed such a beautiful and well-off girl? Based on the scene, authorities confirmed that the victim knew the perpetrator, and they were likely very close. While the police were investigating, they received a phone call from a student named Zhao Liang. He stated that he suspected his friend of murdering the girl and abandoning her in the car. Coincidentally, the caller was also a student at Beijing University of Technology and knew the victim personally. After hearing Zhao Liang's account, the police agreed to let him call a friend. On April 13th, Zhao called his classmate and good friend Wu Jiang. The person who answered the phone was Wu Jiang's grandmother. Seeing this, Zhao Liang simply asked for Wu Jiang's father's phone number. The elderly woman quickly retrieved her son's phone number for her grandson's classmate, as the young man said he had an urgent matter to discuss with the family. Wu Jiang had grown up with his grandmother since childhood, but he had not been home for the past few days. Seeing her grandson's classmate anxiously wanting to contact the family, the grandmother had a bad feeling. As soon as Wu Jiang's father returned home, the elderly woman immediately told her son that something might have happened to Wu Jiang at school. Upon hearing this, the middle-aged man quickly grabbed his bag and left the house. Just a few minutes later, the police arrived at Wu Jiang's house. Seeing that only the elderly woman was home, they hesitated to speak. However, at her request, the police revealed everything. They suspected that Wu Jiang had fled after murdering his girlfriend. Naturally, the elderly woman did not believe it, and repeatedly asked the police if it was true. But when the police said that Wu Jiang himself had confessed the incident to his best friend, she was stunned. Moreover, it was this friend who had asked the police for a chance to call Wu Jiang and persuade him to turn himself in. But he was not at home and could not be reached. Therefore, the police had no choice but to search for Wu Jiang and arrest him for investigation. Upon hearing this, the elderly woman could not believe her eyes. How could her well-behaved grandson become a murderer? That same evening, Wu Jiang was arrested by the police when he sneaked back to school to collect his belongings. When apprehended, the mild-mannered student confessed to the crime. Hearing the perpetrator's story, many expressed sympathy for him. believing that he took his girlfriend's life in a moment of recklessness. Wu Jiang was an exemplary young man with a good personality, top academic performance, and an outgoing, cheerful, and dynamic nature. In the eyes of his friends and teachers, he was considered the model student. Wu Jiang was born into a civil servant family in Beijing, with his father working as a logistics officer in a government agency. After his parents divorced when he was 2 years old, Wu Jiang mainly lived with his grandmother and father in Xuanwu District, Beijing. The divorce of his parents greatly affected his childhood. As he grew up, the absence of maternal love made him fear when others mentioned his family. In 2003, Wu Jiang was admitted to the Foreign Languages Department of Beijing University of Technology. With his outstanding academic performance, he quickly stood out and became the head of propaganda for the university's student union. Although he grew up without a mother's love, his father and grandmother took good care of him, giving him a monthly allowance of 600 yuan. When Wu Jiang was in his second year of university, his father saved up and bought him a Futsong car worth over 100,000 yuan as a reward. At that time, it was very rare for university students to own a car, so his silver-gray Futsong attracted a lot of attention. Many people assumed that Wu Jiang's father was either a senior official or at least a wealthy person. Moreover, with a reputation of being a Beijing native, Wu Jiang became the ideal boyfriend in the eyes of many female classmates, despite not having outstanding looks. Wu Jiang did not explain himself in response to his friends' compliments. However, his encounter with Zhu Yu completely changed his life. During an outdoor group activity organized by the university, Wu Jiang and his classmates were busy moving desks to the playground. At that moment, a girl suddenly patted him on the shoulder and called his name from behind. Wu Jiang instinctively turned around and saw a beautiful girl. The girl introduced herself as knowing Wu Jiang and said her name was Zhu Yueping, a fellow student from the English department at their university. This marked the beginning of Wu Jiang and Zhu Yueping's acquaintance, but they did not develop a close relationship at the time. It wasn't until the second semester of 2004, when the university organized a long-distance running competition, that they both happened to be on the same team. After the competition, the school hosted a light meal, and the two ended up sitting close to each other again. During the meal and conversation, Wu Jiang and Zhu Yueping exchanged phone numbers. However, they only occasionally called or texted each other and did not develop a romantic relationship. In his first and second years at university, Wu Jiang consistently ranked among the top students. He not only earned various awards and scholarships, but was also approved to join the Communist Party of China. As for Zhu Yueping, she was lively, dynamic, and also one of the top students in the English department. Like Wu Jiang, she had won scholarships and worked as reporter for the school newspaper. The two began to stay in close contact in June 2005. At that time, Wu Jiang often drove the Futsong car his father had given him to school. Despite having a car, he remained enthusiastic. If any classmates needed a ride to class, or if it was on his way home, he was always willing to help. He was especially eager to assist beautiful friends like Zhu Yueping. Whether it was going out to eat, watching movies, shopping at malls, or hanging out, Wu Jiang had almost become her full-time driver. On July 19, 2005, he drove Zhu Yueping to Tianjin for a trip. When they stopped near a tourist attraction to buy a map, they returned to find the car window smashed and Zhu Yueping's handbag missing. Besides money and belongings, the handbag contained many important documents and papers, leaving her on the verge of tears. Wu Jiang calmly comforted her while calling the police, and they quickly caught the thief. Recovering her handbag, Zhu Yueping was so overjoyed that she cried and hugged Wu Jiang, feeling he had handled the situation well. At that moment, they officially confirmed their romantic relationship and started dating. After returning to Beijing, they became more comfortable with each other. During the summer break, besides shopping and dining, the couple even stayed together at a hotel for a few days. When night fell, Zhu Yueping often went to bars and nightclubs with a group of friends, both male and female. This made Wu Jiang unhappy, and he seriously told her not to hang out with other male classmates. Hearing this, she felt displeased and scolded her boyfriend, saying, "I'm happy with my life right now. Why are you interfering?" Wu Jiang believed that as her boyfriend, it was natural for him to not want her to go out with other guys. Unable to find common ground, they decided to break up. However, just a few days later, Zhu Yueping texted him to apologize. They got back together, and Wu Jiang resolved to treat his girlfriend even better from then on. In October 2005, the couple officially introduced each other to their parents. Wu Zhang's father was very pleased with his son's girlfriend and welcomed her warmly and enthusiastically. Zhu Yueping's parents initially did not approve of their daughter dating while still in school, but after learning that Wu Zhang was a class leader and a good person, they agreed. With the support of both families, the young couple felt very fortunate. However, this was just the beginning of their challenges. According to Zhu Yueping, the belief that when a man is with a woman, the man should spend money was absolutely correct. Since she was Wu Zhang's official girlfriend, she felt it was only natural for him to cover their expenses. Wu Zhang's father gave him about 600 yuan per month to cover his living expenses. Before buying the car, his monthly expenses were around 400 yuan, allowing him to save 200 yuan each month. After 2 years of university, he had saved over 2,000 yuan. However, since buying the car, especially after dating Zhu Yueping, his savings quickly ran out. In the first month of dating, he spent all the 2,000 yuan he had saved. Compared to Wu Zhang, Zhu Yueping was financially better off and had developed a habit of extravagant spending. Believing that her boyfriend was wealthy and that his father worked for the government, she spent even more lavishly. After spending all 2,000 yuan, Wu Zhang had to ask his grandmother for another 1,000 yuan, but it was gone in just a few days. Not wanting to lose face in front of his girlfriend, he had to borrow money from friends, accumulating debts of up to 6,000 yuan. However, this amount was nothing compared to his girlfriend's extravagant spending habits. What happened next forced Wu Zhang to taste the bitter reality of loving a materialistic girl. In October 2005, Zhu Yueping unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant and informed her boyfriend. After a long discussion, their only solution was to find a hospital for an abortion. But at that time, Wu Zhang was not only broke, but also heavily in debt. In desperation, he thought about his Futsong car and secretly pawned it at a used car market for 60,000 yuan. When she found out that her boyfriend no longer had a car, she refused to meet him, not wanting to date a poor man. Wu Zhang had no choice but to use the money from selling the car to rent one, and buy clothes to please his girlfriend. After his father found out, he spent money to redeem the car for his son. Seeing that her boyfriend had a car again, she agreed to get back together, and they resumed going out everywhere. However, since he had little money, he could no longer spoil his girlfriend as before. Seeing this, Zhu Yueping showed dissatisfaction and complained that he was stingy. A girl only wants to find a wealthy husband. If you can't meet my basic needs, we shouldn't be dating, she declared. But at that time, Wu Zhang was so deeply in love with her that he couldn't agree to break up. Seeing news reports about people making money by buying lottery tickets, he decided to try his luck. However, despite spending a lot of money on lottery tickets, he never won anything. The couple often argued over money, and on several occasions, their conflicts escalated to the point where Wu Zhang angrily grabbed his girlfriend by the neck until she cried for help. To keep the woman he loved, he thought about his father's suburban house, which was being rented out and worth several million yuan promised to him after marriage. When Zhu Yueping learned that her boyfriend had a house, her eyes lit up with joy. She even suggested they move in, since it was close to their school. Later, she pressured him into buying furniture and appliances to furnish the house. However, what Wu Zhang did not expect was that at the beginning of 2006, his father suddenly decided to remarry. Moreover, his young stepmother was pregnant, and the promise of the house changed instantly. Wu Zhang's father planned to move in with his new wife to prepare for their second child. Seeing his father find happiness after over 20 years of being a single parent, Wu Zhang was happy and fully supported their relationship. But when he informed his girlfriend, Zhu Yueping became furious. She cried bitterly, insisting that the house could not be given to his stepmother. Zhu Yueping believed that in the future, the stepmother would take the house for her own child, leaving her boyfriend homeless. "Why are you so useless? How can I marry such a useless man?" she scolded her boyfriend. Although Wu Zhang didn't care much about the house, after hearing his girlfriend's words, he began to feel that if his father had a new love, he would no longer love him. Because of this, he went home to ask his father for the house, leading to a heated argument between them. Since the suburban house was rented out until April 2006, Wu Zhang's father planned to move in once the lease expired. Upon learning this, Zhu Yueping immediately suggested that her boyfriend move into the house before then. "Let's move into the house quickly and claim it first. Your father won't be able to kick us out," she said. The young man found himself caught in a between his father and his girlfriend. The house became a constant source of conflict between them, and every mention of it led to an argument. On April 8, 2006, Zhu Yueping heard that the IKEA furniture store was relocating. She called her boyfriend to go to the store and buy furniture, cookware, tables, chairs, and bedding because of the discounts. After bringing the items home, she still felt they were insufficient and wanted to go back for more, but the store had already closed. Around 8 p.m. that evening, Wu Jiang drove back to school and parked in a lot near the School of Economics and Management. The two sat in the car talking. His girlfriend kept discussing what should be moved into the house first, making him so uneasy that he tried to change the subject. However, Zhu Yueping persisted in suggesting they visit the house, buy clothes, and move in. Why are you so fixated on that house? Sooner or later, it will belong to my father and stepmother. Besides, I just spent over 2,000 yuan on clothes last week, he complained. Hearing this, Zhu became furious, insisting that if they didn't take the keys and move in first, his father would take back the house. Aren't I just looking out for you? A stepmother and a younger brother. They will take that house away from you, she argued sharply. Hearing these words, he grew even angrier, feeling that his girlfriend had touched a nerve regarding his family and insulted his father. Why are you so eager to take over that house? When he said this, Zhu Yueping was momentarily stunned. After a brief silence, she pretended to reconcile and suggested getting intimate with him in the car. However, just as they were about to get intimate, she suddenly said, "After this, let's go see the house." Wu Jiang felt his blood rush to his head. His girlfriend's constant talk about the house made him furious. In an instant, he was overwhelmed by despair, feeling that all his love for her had been in vain. A strong sense of disgust and hatred toward Zhu Yueping erupted in Wu Jiang's heart. He strangled his girlfriend with his hands. Zhu Yueping had no time to react, and within minutes, her face turned purple, and she lay motionless. Seeing her lying still, he panicked, not knowing what to do. He dressed her and covered her with a newly bought quilt from the trunk. He then drove along the Beijing-Shenyang Expressway. Before the incident, they had planned to go to Beidai, so he drove his girlfriend in that direction during the night. However, after refueling, Wu Jiang got lost and decided to drive back to school. Early in the morning on April 9th, he aimlessly drove on the highway again, before finally leaving the car in the Oriental Plaza garage on Wangfujing Street. For the next 3 days, he wandered the streets like a soulless zombie. He considered following his girlfriend to the afterlife, but ultimately couldn't go through with it because he still worried about his father and grandmother. At that moment, his friend Zhao Liang called him. Hearing Wu Jiang's unstable voice, Zhao took him back to the dormitory. However, when they arrived at the dorm, Wu Jiang suddenly whispered in Zhao's ear, asking what would happen if someone killed their girlfriend. Zhao Liang was shocked by the bizarre question. Before he could react, his best friend admitted to strangling Zhu Yueping and leaving her in his car. After saying this, Wu Jiang left the dorm without looking back. Doubting his friend's confession, Zhao Liang searched everywhere, but couldn't find any trace of Zhu Yueping. It was only later that he called the police to report it, and learned they had already found the girl's body. Knowing Wu Jiang was the culprit, Zhao Liang confessed everything, and pleaded with the police to give his friend a chance to turn himself in. However, since Wu Jiang could not be found, the surrender attempt failed, and he was finally arrested by the police on the evening of April 13th. In the victim's room, the police found a diary that revealed many important details. In an entry dated April 1st, 2006, the victim wrote, "Why am I so unlucky to have met such a poor and terrible man? I was deceived by him." Another entry indicated her materialistic mindset. He always lies and boasts about how good his family is, but in reality, his situation isn't even as good as mine. I despise men like him and feel disgusted by him. In court, Wu Jiang admitted to all his actions and apologized to his family and the victim's parents. "I feel like she was with me not for love, but simply as a transaction." He explained his motive for killing his girlfriend. In the end, Wu Jiang was sentenced to a suspended death sentence with a 2-year reprieve. This sentence is often commuted to life imprisonment after 2 years if the convict does not commit further serious offenses. Many people felt pity for Wu Jiang, a student with a bright future, who ruined his life in a moment of recklessness. On the other hand, some also criticized the victim for being too materialistic. Although Zhu Yueping knew her boyfriend wasn't wealthy, she stubbornly stayed with him in hopes of securing the house. It was her insatiable greed that ultimately led her to tragedy. The case of the 22-year-old female student murdered by her boyfriend over his father's house has now come to an end. Case 7. A British millionaire and his Thai wife were found buried next to a duck pen on their family farm, shocking the community. Strangely, their assets remained intact, with the only missing item being a newly purchased pickup truck. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police discovered two strangers breaking into the farm, one of whom drove the pickup truck away before disappearing. The case hit a dead end, until a neighbor provided a shocking statement. When the culprit was revealed, locals were stunned, as the suspect was known as a kind-hearted person who regularly visited temples. So, who murdered the British millionaire couple, and what grudge did they have against them? Let's uncover this horrific crime. This true crime took place in Fright province, northern Thailand. On September 19th, millionaire couple, Alan Hogg and Nod Sudan, had scheduled a meeting with friends in Chiang Mai. However, when the couple failed to show up at the meeting and could not be reached by phone, suspicion arose among their friends. A British national, Alan Hogg was known for always being punctual at social gatherings. If he couldn't attend, he would certainly notify his friends several days in advance, so they could adjust their plans. After waiting for several days, with no sign of Alan and his wife, and with phone calls ringing but unanswered, the group of friends became increasingly concerned. Suspecting something had happened to the couple, one friend volunteered to visit their villa in Fright province to check on them. Arriving at Alan's large farm in Fright on September 23rd, the friend searched the house, but found no trace of the couple. Inside, Alan's phone was still charging, and clothes and luggage remained untouched, indicating the couple hadn't left the house. The friend also noticed the pickup truck was missing from the garage. After a thorough inspection, the friend found bloodstains scattered in the dressing room that hadn't been cleaned. Fearing the worst, the friend immediately called the police to report the situation. Police in Fright province promptly arrived at the scene, collected testimonies, and launched an investigation. Alan Hogg and his wife lived in a 3-story villa situated on a sprawling 32-acre estate. Besides growing fruit trees, the couple also raised ducks and fish, which made the police search more challenging. Due to the vastness of the property, additional officers were dispatched to the scene to assist in the investigation. One officer discovered a recently dug and refilled patch of soil in the orchard near a duck pond. This detail was highly unusual, as no other part of the garden showed signs of being disturbed. The police then deployed sniffer dogs to investigate. Upon arriving at the suspicious area, the dogs began barking incessantly. Suspecting that the bodies of the millionaire couple might be buried beneath, the investigation team hired an excavator to dig. After nearly 2 hours of digging on the Hogg property, police finally unearthed the couple's bodies buried 2 meters deep near the duck pond. The crime scene immediately descended into chaos, with many family members and friends of the couple left in shock by the news. The victims' bodies were later transported to a forensic clinic to determine the cause and time of death. Meanwhile, another police team carried out investigations, collecting evidence and statements from those acquainted with the victims. Robin Hogg, the couple's daughter, flew from the UK to Thailand after learning of her parents' murder to assist with the investigation. Alan Hogg was originally from Edinburgh, Scotland. While vacationing in Thailand, he fell head over heels in love with a local woman named Nod Sudan. Alan was a well-known engineer and businessman. However, he resigned as director of the specialized dry cleaning company Clayful, based in Bonnyrigg, near Edinburgh, in July 2017. He had controlled 5,075 of the company's shares, and was listed as the sole individual with significant control of the until it was sold to Johnson Service Group that same month. Additionally, he managed another company called Sherwood Edinburgh, which was also sold to another party. Alan and his wife, Nod Sudan, frequently traveled back and forth between the UK and Thailand. The couple also owned another house in Australia, where they often vacationed during the summer. To residents of Fright province, Alan was regarded as a wealthy millionaire who preferred the simple, peaceful life of the countryside. Since 2014, the couple had officially settled in Thailand and built a 3-story home on their expansive property, complete with a swimming pool and a poultry farm. The brutal murder of Alan Hogg and Nod Sudan, whose bodies were buried in their garden, shocked the small rural community in northern Thailand. Since the case involved a foreign national, Thai police faced significant pressure to identify the perpetrator. Forensic results revealed that Alan died from 2 gunshot wounds, while Nod Sudan was killed with a wrench. The couple's time of death was determined to be around September 18th, one day before their scheduled meeting in Chiang Mai. The fact that the killer buried the victims on their own property made police suspect the perpetrator was someone they knew. Unable to move the bodies elsewhere, the murderer likely decided to bury them right next to the house. Nod Sadin's relatives described Alan as a kind and generous man who often lent them money during hard times. Meanwhile, Nod was known as a kind-hearted and gentle woman who took responsibility for caring for her disabled younger brother. Despite being married to a wealthy millionaire, Nod never came across as arrogant or conceited. Local residents confirmed that Alan and his wife had no conflicts or disputes with anyone in the area. Upon reviewing cameras inside and outside the property, police immediately uncovered a crucial lead. The person seen driving Alan's newly purchased white Ford Ranger pickup truck away was Werit Sachikit, 63, Nod's older brother. Police promptly launched a manhunt for Werit to question him, but he had disappeared from Phrai province. When locals learned that Sachikit was the suspect police were pursuing, many expressed doubt, as he was known as a kind man. He was often seen helping neighbors and volunteering at a temple. Furthermore, the idea that Sachikit could murder his wealthy sister and brother-in-law seemed implausible, as he had worked with the couple for over 20 years. Despite public skepticism, police pressed forward with their search for Werit Sachikit, as he had vanished, along with the victim's vehicle. However, some of Nod's relatives supported the police's suspicions, claiming that the relationship between Sachikit and the couple was not as harmonious as it appeared. Alan Hogg was a dynamic individual who, alongside his wife, had run a restaurant and a laundry business before returning to farming. Since the couple started their poultry farm raising ducks and geese in Phrai, the relationship between them and Sachikit had gradually deteriorated. As a European, Alan Hogg had high expectations when it came to work. He often appeared critical and dissatisfied with his brother-in-law's work habits. Meanwhile, Sachikit, being older, worked at a slower pace and lacked the efficiency of others. Additionally, Sachikit felt envious of his sister living in a fully equipped 3-story house while he remained in an old wooden home. On September 15th, Nod visited her youngest brother and complained about their older brother neglecting his work and becoming increasingly difficult to deal with. Moreover, whenever the couple tried to give him feedback, Sachikit would argue back, insisting he was right. Frustrated with his unwillingness to change, Nod and Alan demanded that Sachikit leave their farm. Based on information from the youngest brother, the police became even more convinced that Sachikit was the prime suspect. However, given his age, it was unlikely that Sachikit could have single-handedly murdered the couple and buried their bodies so efficiently. Police suspected that he had accomplices who assisted him in this horrific crime. Furthermore, evidence from the crime scene revealed bloodstains left on the sink and the floor. In the garage, they also discovered a wrench that had been unusually cleaned of oil and dirt, leaving it suspiciously polished. Believing the wrench to be the murder weapon used to kill Nod, police sent it for forensic analysis, which confirmed their suspicions. Additionally, CCTV footage showed that on September 18th, a strange man arrived at the farm, and it was Sachikit who greeted him. However, after the two men left, the CCTV cameras did not capture any further images of Alan and Nod. From this detail, police suspected the two strange men were accomplices who helped Sachikit murder and dispose of Alan and Nod. To capture Sachikit, police were determined to track down the stolen pickup truck he had taken from the victim's home. After days of searching, investigators discovered that the truck had been sold to a local resident living in the nearby hills for 200,000 baht. However, that person had resold the truck to a man from Laos for 430,000 baht. The man from Laos later drove the truck to Ayutthaya during a business trip. Upon learning about the murder case and the vehicle police were searching for, the man voluntarily handed the truck over to authorities. After recovering the vehicle, police also arrested Sachikit. However, to their surprise, he denied killing his sister and brother-in-law. Sachikit insisted that he had no involvement in the deaths of his sister and her husband. Without concrete evidence, and with CCTV only capturing Sachikit driving away, police were unable to detain him. After Sachikit was granted bail, police were forced to release him. The case hit a dead end, leaving police extremely concerned about their inability to apprehend the killer. Since the truck had been bought and sold multiple times, it was difficult for police to identify fingerprints on it. Amid the stalemate, a police officer suggested monitoring Sachikit's movements, as he remained the prime suspect. While one team followed Sachikit, another continued to search the crime scene for additional clues. At this point, a neighbor named Suma Utpamun, 50, unexpectedly appeared at the police station. No one could have predicted that this testimony would lead to the easiest capture of the culprit. Suma hesitantly admitted that, prior to the murders, War Sachikit had approached him for help in killing Alan Hogg. However, upon learning that Sachikit also intended to kill his own sister, Suma immediately refused. Still, Suma accepted 25,000 baht from Sachikit and introduced him to two strong men to carry out the heinous act. The two men Suma introduced were Pia Kamsai, 63, and Kittafong Kamwan, 24. After hearing Suma Utpamun's testimony, police immediately arrested him for aiding the crime and sent officers to apprehend the three suspects. Suma agreed to testify as a witness in exchange for a lighter sentence. With a cooperating witness, police quickly raided the suspects' homes and successfully arrested all three perpetrators. Waru Sachikit eventually confessed to all charges, admitting that he was the mastermind behind the murders of his sister and brother-in-law. He revealed that he had hired Pia Kamsai and Kittafong Kamwan for 50,000 baht to murder Alan Hogg and his wife, Nad Sudain. Police Chief Sampat Praputsa, the officer leading the investigation, ordered the three perpetrators to reenact the crime at the scene. Pia Kamsai confirmed that at around 6 p.m. on September 18, 2018, he and Kittafong were led into the farm by Sachikit. Pia was instructed to go to the back garden, where he found Alan feeding the ducks and shot him twice, killing him. Meanwhile, Kittafong found Nad in the kitchen, covered her mouth, dragged her to the garage, and pinned her to the ground. Sachikit then used a wrench to strike his sister on the head repeatedly until she died. The three murderers then dragged Nad's body to the duck pen, near where Alan had been killed. They used a pickaxe, shovels, and Alan's small excavator to dig a 2-meter-deep hole and push the couple's bodies into it. After finishing the job, Sachikit took the family's Ford Ranger truck and sold it. Based on the trio's testimony, police recovered the gun used to shoot Alan, which they had thrown into a creek between Wang Chin District and Long District. Whereat Sachikit confessed that he and his brother-in-law, Alan Hogg, had disagreements over how the farm was managed. Sachikit had been well loved by his sister, Nad, who allowed him to build a small wooden house on the couple's expansive property. Trusting her brother, Nad appointed Sachikit as the farm's head gardener. His duties included tending to the plants, maintaining the orchard, and caring for the chickens and 15 cows. However, during his time working on the farm, Alan and Sachikit frequently clashed. When Sachikit learned that the couple intended to evict him from the farm, he became furious. He felt he had been exploited by his brother-in-law, working for over a decade without receiving any proper compensation. When Sachikit demanded payment for managing the farm, Alan flatly refused. Feeling unjustly treated and angered further by Nad's siding with her husband, Sachikit's resentment grew. This only heightened his rage, as he knew that if he were evicted, his advanced age would make it nearly impossible to find another job. Additionally, Sachikit had nowhere to go, as he owned no house and had no children to support him. With the intention of murdering his sister and brother-in-law, Sachikit sought hitman to assist him. Lacking the money to pay the hitman, he came up with the idea of selling the newly purchased truck belonging to Alan and Nad. Due to legal restrictions on land and business ownership for foreigners, expatriates living in Thailand often register assets under the names of Thai relatives or associates. This is why Alan frequently purchased properties under the names of his wife's family members. Being wealthy, Alan and his wife acquired numerous properties, including land and houses, which were registered under Nad's siblings, including Sachikit. Even after Alan and Nad were murdered, some of their assets remained under the suspect's name. In fact, the couple's only daughter had even considered asking her uncle to help manage the farm if she relocated her parents to live in the UK. Unfortunately, Sachikit destroyed his own future and life in a moment of rage. After being arrested, Sachikit showed no remorse or regret for his actions. The fact that Sachikit hired hitman to kill his own sister and brother-in-law shocked the residents of Phrai province. Nad's uncle, Sangwarn Suddakan, 78, confirmed that he saw her at his store on the morning of September 18th, and she seemed cheerful. He also stated that he had never heard Nad speak ill of her brother. If there had been any conflict, she would have likely kept it hidden from him and other relatives. Speaking about Weret Sachikit, Sangwarn also confirmed that his nephew was a kind and decent man. He was shocked to learn that Sachikit had hired people to kill his sister and brother-in-law over a minor family dispute. Prasath Sudan, 61, another uncle of Nad who lived just a few kilometers away, described Werit as a kind-hearted person. None of the relatives or local residents could have imagined that he was the perpetrator. A year after the murders, on June 3, 2019, the Fright Provincial Court officially began the trial for the murders of Alan and Nad Hogg. Werit Radhanachijikit was identified as the mastermind who hired hitman to murder his sister and brother-in-law due to family conflicts. Police charged Werit with conspiring to commit murder to seize Hogg's assets and sell some of them. All three perpetrators, Werit Radhanachijikit, Pia Kamsai, and Kitafong Kamwan, were sentenced to death on multiple charges. Sumatwatpaman received a 25-year prison sentence, reduced by half from the initial 50 years due to his cooperation with the police during the investigation. The Fright Provincial Court described the murder of the British millionaire as an act that severely damaged Thailand's reputation. Pawina Chwayen, the victim's family lawyer, stated that Alan's relatives in the UK were satisfied with the court's verdict. However, due to the cruelty and horrific nature of the case, they did not want to revisit this painful story. The case of the British millionaire, couple murdered by their brother-in-law over family conflicts, has now come to a close. Case 8. This case occurred in Sweden, but word of it quickly spread across news organizations worldwide. Because the crime committed against a 7-month pregnant woman was so atrocious, it left many wondering why. People have varied opinions about this, including whether it's related to the assimilation of refugees and immigrants into Swedish society. However, you be the judge and let me know in the comments. Let's go! On April 29, 2023, at 1 p.m., Melissa Elmborg arrived at her daughter Saga Elmborg's apartment complex to pick up a few items. The family was brimming with anticipation for the future. 20-year-old Saga was 31 weeks or 7 months pregnant with her partner Mohammed Amit Ibrahim, whom they affectionately called Amin. The young couple had been together since the fall of 2021, and they were expecting a healthy baby boy in June 2023. Saga was eager to become a mother, frequently sharing her pregnancy photos with friends and family. Her close-knit family were highly supportive of her journey into motherhood. Saga had been diligently preparing for the baby's arrival, enrolling in prenatal classes and gathering essential baby gear. Melissa had been living with Saga intermittently to assist her during pregnancy. She had left for a couple of nights, Thursday and Friday, April 27th and 28th, to give the couple some privacy. Upon arriving at the apartment, Melissa was on the phone with her other daughter, Julia. She rang the doorbell first, just in case Amin is running around naked, but no one answered. Irritated, she knocked and called through the response. When she went to unlock the door with her key, she noticed it was already unlocked. What the hell are they doing not locking the doors, she thought, puzzled. As Saga always locked the door, even for short trips to the basement or to collect the mail. Entering the apartment, Melissa heard water running from the kitchen faucet. She went to turn it off and then, to her horror, she saw Saga lying face up on the bedroom floor, her long dark hair covering her face. Melissa screamed in grief into the phone as she saw a marble top on top of Saga and a lamp cord around her neck, with no signs of life. Desperately, Melissa lifted the table and called emergency services immediately. She would later recall how doing CPR was of no use. Her daughter was too stiff. She also said her cold. Police and paramedics arrived swiftly, but tragically, both Saga and her unborn child were already deceased. The investigators cordoned off the area and began a murder investigation. Saga's body was found on the bedroom floor, between the bed and a TV stand, partially on a carpet. She lay on her back, head turned to the left, arms alongside her body, dressed in a pink ribbed set, pants, cardigan, and a top. Blood covered her face, particularly around her nose, mouth, left eye, and forehead. A long dark hair, matted with blood, obscured her face. Bleeding was visible, her tongue protruded, and blood trickled from her left nostril to her cheek. DNA traces were collected from under her nails and clothing. Impressions of the table base were found on her neck, thigh, trousers, and the carpet. Below the foot of the bed was a lamp with its cord loosely wound around Saga's neck. The lamp socket was under her left shoulder, with no damage observed on the lamp. The lamp's base was circular and measured about 8.5 centimeters in diameter. Upon examining the bedroom and the living room, investigators found all the drawers pulled out, with clothes scattered across the floor. Saga's cell phone was discovered on the bed, underneath a blanket. One pillow on the king-size bed had a depression, as if someone had been sleeping on it, whilst on the other one it did not, suggesting Saga had been lying on the bed all alone before being attacked. The washroom floor was littered with scattered jewelry boxes. There were no signs of forced entry on the balcony door or windows. In the kitchen, food was left in a frying pan on the stove. Shoe prints were collected throughout the apartment. Based on the crime scene, it did not appear that there had been much of a struggle. The coroner concluded that Saga was strangled and suffocated to death with a marble slab. The death struggle lasted for 5 to 10 minutes, with the estimated time of death around 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. on April 29. Police began investigating the crime immediately on April 29, starting with a series of interviews with Saga's family to piece together the events leading up to this tragic discovery. According to Saga's mother, Melissa, just the day before, on April 28, Saga and a few friends had a meet-up at the Mocha Deli and everyone had a great time. But Saga appeared nervous, frequently checking her phone as she awaited a text from her boyfriend, Amin. Saga's anxiety stemmed from Amin's plan to inform his parents that he was going to be a father. At 7 months pregnant, Saga was understandably on edge about how this conversation would unfold. According to Melissa, Saga was worried about how Amin would react to the news. While her mom and friends continued with dinner, Saga decided to head back to her apartment around 7:30 p.m. Although Saga's family knew about her relationship with Amin and their upcoming baby, Amin's family had no idea. Amin had kept his relationship with Saga a secret from his family, who had arrived in Sweden as refugees from Somalia when he was just a child. They were devout Muslims, while Saga and her family were Christians. Amin believed his family would disapprove of his relationship with Saga, especially with her being pregnant out of wedlock. He had confided in Saga that his family might ostracize him if they knew the truth. Rumors circulated that Amin had been seeing other women while in a relationship with Saga. When Saga discovered she was pregnant, Amin initially tried to persuade her to have an abortion, fearing the repercussions from his family. Saga, however, was determined to keep the baby, saying she could raise the baby on her own if necessary. When she announced her pregnancy to her family in October the previous year, they were happy and willing to support her decision. Her grandmother shared some wisdom with her to think through how this would work for her and her baby, given her current financial situation, and whether her boyfriend was willing to take the next step and support them as a family. She also raised her concern with Amin's culture being very different than their Swedish upbringing. Over time, Amin seemed to accept the pregnancy and even agreed to move in together with Saga in a new, larger apartment on May 2nd, 2023, with him covering the rent. Melissa noted that, despite Saga and Amin being together for almost 2 years, she had only met Amin 3 times. This was surprising, given that their daughter was 7 months pregnant with his baby at the time of her death. Melissa also recalled overhearing a phone conversation between Saga and Amin, where Saga confronted Amin after a woman called Diana claimed Amin had asked her to kick Saga's belly to induce a miscarriage. Also, when Diana spoke to her daughter, she said she was sleeping with Amin. Amin managed to calm Saga down, convincing her it wasn't true. Given this story, when Melissa discovered her daughter's murder, she immediately urged the police to question Amin. The police first established a timeline of events. On April 27th to 28th, Amin took sick leave from work. On April 27th, Amin spent the afternoon and evening at Saga's home. Saga had given him an ultimatum to inform his family about their relationship, the move, and her pregnancy. On April 28th, Saga also called in sick from work. Amin was supposed to tell his family about their relationship that day at 10 p.m., when his mom would return from work. Amin was then to come and update Saga directly at her apartment that evening. She expected him around 11 p.m. and was messaging him nervously all day. Her anxiety was noticed by her mom and her friends during the deli. The police discovered that between 11:13 and 11:15 p.m. on April 28th, Amin wrote a message to Saga stating that he would not tell his parents about her and that they wouldn't move in together because he couldn't lose his family. However, he never sent the messages. These facts established Amin as a primary suspect, suggesting a motive for the crime. Instead of telling his family as he claimed he would, he went over to Saga's place. The question was, what happened there? Was it an escalation or a premeditation? Interestingly, police learned that Amin's mom had returned home far earlier than 10 p.m. that day, arriving at 3 p.m. Did Amin already speak with her when Saga was messaging him all day? Or did he fail to muster the courage to tell her at all? Or was this all a ruse to string Saga along with no intention of following through? The police confronted Amin and took him in for questioning. The key updates from the interrogations are as follows. When initially informed about a murder that happened at an apartment in Kungsgarten 36B, which was Saga's apartment, Amin remained calm and even joked around with the detectives. They found it strange that he didn't mention anything about his girlfriend living at the address, pretending not to know the location at all. He did ask who died there, and then strangely questioned the police about how he could possibly kill someone the previous day. When informed that a woman, Saga, was murdered, Amin immediately claimed he was not responsible for her death, stating he had an alibi for the night, and that he last saw her the previous day on April 27th, which contradicted his earlier display of ignorance of the location. Due to this strange behavior, contradicting statements, and the accumulating evidence pointing to him as the primary suspect, police arrested Amin and placed him in custody. Fast forward a few months, and Amin was on trial for the murder of his heavily pregnant girlfriend. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, stating that Amin's DNA was found on the stairs near Saga's apartment door on April 29th at 7:20 p.m. This evidence was significant because the tracking dog, Amina, traced the scent and is known to detect scents only up to 24 hours. This strongly suggested that Amin was present at Saga's apartment on the 28th, contradicting his claim of not being there. The defense objected to this evidence, arguing that the tests were conducted outdoors. However, Inspector Hannah Hockstrom testified that the difficulty level for the dog remained the same regardless of being indoors or outdoors. Prosecutor Elizabeth Anderson stated that Amin killed his girlfriend by, quote, suffocating and strangling her through pressure on her neck, impacting her trachea and the blood supply to her head. Amin entered her apartment using the spare key while Saga was asleep on the bed, as indicated by the depression on the side of the pillow. He attacked her, and they ended up on the floor besides the bed. Initially, he likely used the but then dragged the 30-kilogram or 66-pound marble tabletop and jammed it against her throat, suffocating her with his weight. As Saga was heavily pregnant, she would have struggled to get up under the crushing weight of the table, which left impressions on her neck and thigh. It's estimated she struggled for about 5 to 10 minutes before succumbing. Amin then staged pulling out drawers in the room and scattering jewelry on the floor to simulate a robbery. In court, Amin claimed that Saga might have been killed by a gang searching for drugs. He alleged that he had received a bag containing a large amount of money and other illegal items, and he had previously used some of the contents, which would have infuriated them. When confronted by the gang, he pointed them to Saga's apartment, but they didn't know he had used some of the contents. He claimed the gang must have broken into Saga's apartment and killed her when they found some of their property missing. However, this story was inconsistent with the district court's findings. If Amin feared the gangs, he wouldn't be living openly and freely in his own residence. There were also no leads, DNA, or forensic evidence linking these alleged illegal items to the crime. And if such property existed, only the killer would know exactly where to find it. Amin claims Saga had no idea about this, so why was her place not ransacked convincingly? This statement worked against him, as it proved only the killer would know precisely where the contraband was. It appeared more likely that Amin fabricated the story, as his friends Samir Taleb and Abdi swore under oath they were unaware of any gang affiliation of Amin. Amin's DNA was found on Saga's clothes and under her left nails. Amin claimed they had sexual intercourse on April 27th, explaining the presence of his DNA due to their passionate encounter throughout the apartment. He claimed he never visited her apartment on the 28th. Additional circumstantial evidence used in the trial included phone records from November 2022 showing that Amin did ask Diana Hussein to kick Saga's belly to induce a miscarriage. Amin's cell phone records also showed that he had Googled, quote, "Can fetuses die from kicking?" One of the most revealing details came from examining the text messages exchanged between Saga and Amin on the day she was murdered. Saga tries to cheer him up before his meeting with his family. He says, "Feels like I can almost feel my heartbeat all the way down to my stomach." Voila. Saga says, "Just take it easy, it'll be fine, babe, talk to me." After a while he responded again, saying he had told one person, and they took it in stride. However, according to the prosecutor, there was nothing in the investigation to indicate that Amin told his family about Saga that evening. Saga's last message was sent shortly after midnight on April 29th. "Baby, talk to me." It's alleged that Amin's cell phone was already turned off, and he was on his way to her apartment to end her life. After a trial that garnered much public interest in Swedish society, Muhammad Amin Ibrahim, or Amin's fate, rested in the balance. The prosecutors reasoned with these facts. Amin had been found to have motives to get rid of both his relationship and his unborn son. No one else is suspected to have a motive to harm Saga. Because the apartment showed no signs of forced entry, the locks were intact, and there were no signs of break-in. There's no reason to believe that Saga would let anyone in easily, especially as it was near midnight. It had to be someone familiar to her. Amin had a set of keys to her apartment, so he could have also entered by unlocking the door. There were no signs of a struggle that left an impression on the furniture or otherwise on the apartment, suggesting Saga was caught off guard by someone familiar to her like Amin. The DNA found in the stairwell by the sniffer dog also pointed to the fact that Amin was at Saga's apartment on the 28th, and not just the 27th, strongly suggesting Amin was the one who carried out the crime. Amin's semen was found on the clothes Saga wore when she was murdered, and both front and back of the body. This led to debates in court on whether Saga showered recently, or if she was wearing unwashed clothes. Because if the DNA was from before, it doesn't support the prosecution's claim that Amin was definitely there on the 28th. The DNA under fingernails also brought up the question about Saga showering often. Her mom attested that she showered at least once a day and washed her hands often, especially as she was pregnant and did not want to fall sick. Had Amin only been there on the 27th, there would have been ample opportunities to wash off his DNA under her fingernails. The morning after the murder, Amin deleted Saga from Snapchat and deleted the last day's text messages and calls from Saga, but they were still retrieved. This clearly suggested that Amin was trying to cover his tracks before the police even spoke to him. Saga's phone activities the day before her death were clearly obtained, but Amin's were a different story. On April 28th at 8 p.m. her cell phone connected to a telephone tower near her residence and remained there consistent with her returning and staying home. She seemed to use her phone constantly between 12:53 a.m. on April 29th, but then her activity ceased. Before this, Saga's phone showed several attempts to contact Amin and interactions with his friend Samir, trying to get him to contact Amin. On the flip side, Amin's phone and his alibi for the night led to some shocking revelations. Amin claimed that he was sitting in a car with his friend Amir, and Amir was occupied in a long phone call, but examining this in detail revealed a very different picture. From 12:22 a.m. to 1:57 a.m., Amin's phone was left unused, and he received a call from his friend Samir at 12:28 a.m., but it was unanswered. Saga had asked Samir to check up on Amin. At that precise moment, the phone signal placed it near Saga's address, which is contradictory to Amin's statements that he was far away with his friend Amir. Also, detectives found it implausible that he was just sitting in the car next to his friend and not using his phone at all. The time that his cell phone was unused coincided with the time it is unaccounted for in his alibi, providing the opportunity he had to commit the murder between the window of 12:28 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. Also, both Amir and Amin's cell phones were mysteriously turned off at precisely 2:16 a.m., while Amin's phone still had 40% charge remaining. This suggests one person had both phones on hand. His phone being turned off was also an unusual pattern, given the previous days and times of use. Finally, during the initial questioning, Amin outright said he had an alibi for the night of the 28th, which was a strange thing to say, before he was even asked about it, indicating he may have pre-planned what he was going to say when he was questioned by the police. Despite the lack of clear direct evidence in this case, the circumstantial evidence was considered strong enough to assess the case in its entirety, but some were hopeful that the lack of direct evidence could not prove without a reasonable doubt that Amin was guilty of the crime. The one piece of evidence that seems unanswered was the footprint found in Saga's apartment that did not match Amin. Nevertheless, this does not rule out Amin being there on the 28th. Amin completely denies any wrongdoing. "Yes, I have been in denial for 9 months, now," he said in one of his last interrogations, and meant that he loved Saga. Also, the investigation into Amin's fears that his family would disown him for dishonoring the family name was found to be inconclusive. In short, no evidence seems to indicate the family was even aware of his expectant girlfriend, and that he had told them they would move in together a week later. It's likely Amin made up this excuse hiding behind his religion and Somali heritage, and we'll never know if his family would welcome their baby and Saga with open arms into their lives. Swedish court chairman Lars-Gunnar Lund stated this is an honor-related crime, and the Swedish police even defined their version of this type of crime. According to the prosecutor Muhammad Amin Ibrahim, lived in an honorable context of his own definition, where he was not allowed to be with, quote, white women. On June 5, 2024, 22-year-old Mohammed Amin Ibrahim was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Saga, the unanimous in its decision. Amin continues to deny any wrongdoing, quote, I love Saga and our common child, and have never had any thoughts, ideas, or plan to kill Saga. Violence is not in my nature, he said during the trial. Amin and his defense lawyer believe that the perpetrator must be someone else, and they plan to appeal the verdict. Case 9. This is the true story of a young woman named Wu Xiaoyan from Zhejiang Province, China. Wu Xiaoyan was born in 1987 into a poor family in a remote mountain village. As a child, Wu was just like many other little girls, possessing a cute and pretty appearance with big, round, sparkling black eyes. Since her parents were farmers, she often helped her father with farm work, and the neighbors praised her for being a well-behaved and understanding child. She never gave her parents any reason to worry or trouble themselves about her. When she started primary school, Wu Xiaoyan was one of the top students in her class. However, a fateful turning point occurred when she was only 8 years old and in the 2nd grade. She began noticing that she couldn't see the words her teacher wrote on the blackboard clearly. Her eyes often itched, teared up, and felt a burning sensation. One day after school, she asked her mother why her eyes always felt blurry, as if a foggy layer was covering her vision. But her mother didn't pay much attention to her question, thinking it was just the idle talk of a child. Knowing her parents were busy working, Wu didn't ask further and went on with her daily life as usual. In the following days at school, she squinted to read the words on the blackboard, but found it increasingly difficult. When Wu Xiaoyan told her teacher about the issue, she was merely advised to maintain good eye hygiene and rest more. A few months later, her vision deteriorated so severely that she could no longer see the writing on the blackboard. Noticing her declining academic performance, her teacher contacted Xiaoyan's parents to inform them about the situation. Everyone found it strange, as she had been the top student in her class, yet her grades had suddenly plummeted. In the mid-1990s in China, televisions were an expensive household item that only well-off families could afford. In this poor rural area, families with black and white TVs could be counted on one hand. Naturally, Xiaoyan's family did not own one. Adults found it puzzling that, with no TV at home and her time spent either studying or working in the fields, her eyesight could decline so rapidly. When questioned by the adults, she recounted her inability to see clearly, the burning sensation in her eyes, and the persistent blurry, foggy layer obstructing her vision. At that moment, her mother remembered the comment her daughter had made months earlier, but had brushed aside. Realizing the situation might be serious, the family took her to the district hospital for an examination. However, due to the hospital's poor resources, lacking professional medical equipment, the doctors could only perform a basic checkup. After hearing about her condition, they merely prescribed her eye drops to alleviate the strain. A few weeks later, the prescribed eye drops ran out, but her vision showed no improvement. Thinking it was nothing serious, her family bought more eye drops for her, hoping she would recover. This continued until Wu Xiaoyan turned 9 years old and entered the 3rd grade of primary school. Then tragedy struck. At that time, Xiaoyan's face suddenly became abnormally swollen. She constantly complained about a crawling sensation on her face, which was very itchy and uncomfortable. Her parents could only apply an ointment to her face to temporarily reduce the swelling. A week later, they were shocked to discover that their daughter's face had changed dramatically. Xiaoyan's nose had swollen unusually, pushing her eyes farther apart, and the distance between her eyes began to widen. After that, her face continued to grow larger, and the effects on her face made it impossible for Xiaoyan to sleep at night. At this point, her parents realized the severity of the situation and took their daughter to the district hospital for a checkup. However, the doctors were unable to determine what illness she had, as the hospital's infrastructure was still rudimentary and lacked modern equipment. They speculated that she might have contracted a rare disease with an unknown cause and only prescribed some anti-inflammatory and swelling-reducing medication. Over time, Xiaoyan's face continued to swell larger, despite her taking the medication diligently. Teased by her classmates and overcome with shame, she decided to drop out of school and stayed home to practice writing on her own. News of the girl with the strange face quickly spread throughout the impoverished rural area. Many people came to her house just to see Wu Xiaoyan's unusual face for themselves. Within just a few months, her nose became even more severely deformed, almost entirely destroyed. A large swelling completely obscured her nose, making it unrecognizable unless examined closely. This also caused her to face significant difficulties, especially frequent episodes of difficulty breathing. Meanwhile, her eyes became bulging, and her strange face terrified many people. Villagers began calling her the horse-faced girl because her face resembled that of the animal. Feeling insecure about her disfigured face, and fearing both scaring others and being mocked, she stayed hidden at home all day. While some people sympathized with her family, others spread rumors about the cause of her condition. Some villagers speculated that her transformation into a horse-like face was due to her family's eating habits. In this poor, remote, mountainous district, people were extremely frugal with food. When livestock or poultry died from disease, they wouldn't bury or dispose of them, but often turned them into meals. Wu's family was no exception. They frequently used sick or dead pigs, chickens, and ducks as food to improve their household's nutrition. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan's parents became worried, believing that their daughter had eaten contaminated food, which might have caused her illness. From then on, the family changed their daily diet. In addition, following advice from some villagers to use traditional Chinese medicine, her grandparents decided to try it. They searched for various strange folk remedies, ground them into pastes, and applied them to their granddaughter's face. However, Xiaoyan opposed this method because the paste caused a burning sensation and extreme pain on her face. Seeing that this approach wasn't effective, her grandparents then forced her to drink herbal medicines to treat her condition. After a period of using her grandparents' folk remedies, her face not only didn't improve, but swelled even more. To treat her, the family could only go to the hospital to get anti-inflammatory and pain relief medication. Over time, rumors about the horse-faced girl spread further across the district. Some malicious individuals even claimed her family was cursed, and that the gods had cast a spell on their daughter. They speculated that the Wu family had offended the gods, or that someone had cursed their only daughter as an act of revenge. Xiaoyan had once been the pride of her family, and her parents had high hopes for her bright future. Believing that their granddaughter was being punished by the gods or harmed by an evildoer, her grandparents suggested the family invite a shaman to perform an exorcism. Her parents spent a large sum of money on a cleansing ritual for their daughter, hoping her face would return to normal. However, contrary to their belief, Xiaoyan's face remained unchanged. Knowing her strange illness was causing her family so much worry and sorrow, Xiaoyan's temperament also changed. She began locking herself in the house every day, never stepping outside. To help her feel less uncomfortable, her parents removed all the mirrors from their home. Even so, she still felt uneasy inside and envied her peers, who could go to school and play games like hide-and-seek together. And so, Xiaoyan spent years confined to her house. Although there were no mirrors in her room, she could still feel with her hands that her face had continued to swell even more. As years passed, Xiaoyan grew into a young woman. While girls at this age often enjoy dressing up, she was the opposite. Not only did she stay locked inside her house for over a decade, but whenever she went out, she used a cloth to completely cover her head and face so no one could see her unusual appearance. Her family's life had already been difficult, and over the years they spent a significant amount of money on her treatments, but none of them brought any results. However, another terrible misfortune struck this unfortunate family. Witnessing her daughter's prolonged suffering, Xiaoyan's mother became increasingly worried. She worked both on the farm and took on extra jobs in hopes of earning enough money to take her daughter to a major city for medical treatment. Working day and night took a toll on her body, and Xiaoyan's mother suffered a stroke due to a brain hemorrhage. Although she was rushed to the hospital in time and her life was saved, she fell into a vegetative state. This placed an even greater burden on Xiaoyan's father, Wu Lirong. He now had to bear the cost of his daughter's treatment, as well as the hospital bills for his wife. Since he was often away from home working, the responsibility of caring for her mother was left to Xiaoyan. After suffering from her illness for decades, Xiaoyan had also lost her vision. To adapt and avoid relying too much on her father, Xiaoyan learned how to live in darkness. She practiced identifying objects by touch, washing vegetables, cooking, cleaning, and performing tasks proficiently. Occasionally, her cooking was too salty because she added too much salt, but her father still ate everything out of appreciation for her efforts. Even the care for her mother was done entirely by Xiaoyan to ease her father's burden. However, because she couldn't see, Xiaoyan sometimes couldn't avoid unexpected accidents. One day, while preparing a meal, she tripped over a chair and fell. The severe impact caused the large tumor on her face to rupture badly. Fortunately, it was raining that day, so her father was home. Seeing his daughter bleeding heavily after the fall, he rushed her to the provincial hospital. Upon arrival at the hospital, the doctors were shocked by her severely deformed face. After regaining their composure, they stopped the bleeding, bandaged her wound, and conducted a series of tests to identify the disease. By this time, it was 2009, and Wu Xiaoyan was 22 years old. With the help of modern equipment, the doctors at the provincial hospital suspected she had optic nerve tumors. This rare and strange disease was neither caused by diet nor the divine punishment rumored by the villagers. Hearing the doctor's confirmation, Mr. Wu felt as though a burden that had plagued his family for decades had finally been lifted. He hoped that his daughter could undergo surgery to live a normal life. However, Xiaoyan's physical condition at that time was far from ideal. The fall had caused her to lose 1,000 milliliters of blood. The doctors were very concerned about her condition, as she had lost nearly a quarter of the total blood volume in the human body. This was an extremely dangerous situation because any delay could have been fatal for the patient. Since the swelling on her face had ruptured, the best option was to proceed with surgery as soon as possible. Hearing the doctor's remarks, Mr. Wu felt overwhelmed. He desperately wanted to arrange surgery for his daughter as soon as possible, but the family had completely run out of money. They were just farmers, and when Xiaoyan's mother fell ill, their expenses had suddenly skyrocketed. Even with Mr. Wu taking on extra work outside, their income was insufficient, and they occasionally had to borrow money from relatives. While Wu Lirong was fretting over the cost of surgery, a doctor suggested letting journalists report on Xiaoyan's condition. Through this, they could receive donations from people across the country. After learning about this suggestion, Mr. Wu wanted to try it, but feared that his daughter would feel ashamed if she found out. His daughter was only 22 years old, and he worried that being filmed and interviewed by many people might embarrass her because of her horse-like face. However, faced with the harsh reality of his wife bedridden from a brain hemorrhage, he had no choice but to tell Xiaoyan about going public with her story. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan expressed her willingness to be interviewed and allowed reporters to film and make a feature story about her. Mr. Wu, knowing he couldn't afford the expensive medical costs, also agreed to be interviewed to share his daughter's life story. Once major media outlets began reporting, the news about the strange horse-faced girl spread like wildfire across Zhejiang province. The story even circulated throughout China, with numerous articles calling for donations to support the father and daughter. Some people were curious about Xiaoyan's horse face, but many expressed sympathy for her and compassion for the poor family. Within just a few weeks, over $11,000 was raised for the horse-faced girl to undergo surgery. However, when they returned to the hospital full of hope, the doctor expressed uncertainty about the surgery's success, as the chance of recovery was only 0.1 per thousand. This statement felt like a cold splash of water on the heartbroken father. The doctor at the provincial hospital suggested the father and daughter go to the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital in Guangzhou. It was a facility with many skilled doctors and advanced equipment capable of performing the surgery successfully. At the same time, Xiaoyan's story was covered by Liaoning Satellite Television, Guangzhou Daily, and other media outlets. Hundreds more people donated to the poor girl, and the family received an additional $25,000. This money helped the father and daughter embark on their journey to Guangzhou for diagnosis and treatment. In early March 2010, Mr. Wu took his daughter on a train to Guangzhou, the longest journey Xiaoyan had taken in 14 years. One day in March, a peculiar girl arrived at the outpatient building of the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital in Guangzhou. The petite girl wore a pink scarf over her head, which piqued the curiosity of both doctors and patients. When she met the doctors, she explained that she had to cover her head because she felt too ugly and feared scaring others. Hearing this, the medical staff present felt even more intrigued. With the encouragement of the doctors, Xiaoyan hesitantly lifted her scarf. Daughter, Liao Guiqing, the head of maxillofacial surgery, was shocked upon seeing the patient's nearly completely deformed face. In all his years of medical practice, it was the first time he had encountered such a case. In the middle of her face was a massive protrusion that pushed her eyes far apart, making her nose and mouth barely visible upon close examination. Her face had completely lost the proportions and contours of a normal human, resembling that of a horse. After performing a CT scan, The doctors discovered a large foreign mass in the middle of her cheek the size of an outward protruding skull, which spanned her entire face and destroyed its structure. Her eyes had been pushed to the sides of her face, leaving her blind. Her nose was flattened, resulting in the loss of her sense of smell and difficulty breathing. Her mouth had been compressed toward her chin, allowing her to breathe only with great difficulty. At the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital, doctors conducted a series of tests on the young woman. The results were surprising, completely overturning the previous diagnosis given at the Zhejiang Provincial Hospital. Wu Xiaoyan was not suffering from optic nerve tumors, but from a condition called fibrous dysplasia. This disease occurs due to a genetic mutation on chromosome 20. The gene mutation causes fibrous cells to rapidly develop and replace bone cells, creating an abnormal type of fibrous bone. When nerves are compressed by fibrous bone tissue or affected bones in the face, patients experience vision loss, bulging eyes, and other symptoms. Xiaoyan's jawbone had not calcified, but over time, the fibrous bone lengthened and accumulated on her face, forming a large swelling. She had been living with this disease for 13 years, so it had progressed to a very severe stage. The doctors presented her family with an urgent solution: surgery to remove the swelling on her face, though it carried significant risks. The surgery posed a risk of death, but if left untreated, she would continue living in misery, tormented by her illness. Xiaoyan and her father thought deeply about it, and eventually decided to take the risk and proceed with the surgery. She said she didn't care about the success rate of the operation, but only knew that it was her only hope. She didn't want to continue living as the horse-faced girl, or have to cover her face with a scarf every time she went outside. The courage and determination of the father and daughter deeply inspired the doctors. Although the surgery would be extremely challenging, the medical team resolved to do their best to minimize risks and developed a detailed plan. First, they would make an incision in the center of her face to remove the large swelling, then proceed to fix her upper jaw and forehead bones with titanium plates while pulling her chin back into its original position. Next, they would clean the nasal cavity, reposition her eyes into their sockets, and use titanium mesh to secure the eyeballs in place. Finally, the excess skin in the middle of her face would be removed and sutured according to the newly reconstructed facial contours. This surgical plan, developed by specialists from multiple departments, involved using titanium plates and mesh to reconstruct the patient's face. The night before the surgery, both Xiaoyan and her father were somewhat anxious. She wanted to call her mother to inform her about the operation, but her father refused. Mr. Wu Lirong didn't dare tell his daughter the truth that her mother had passed away a week before the surgery was scheduled. All the relatives decided to keep this secret, fearing that if Xiaoyan found out, she would suffer psychological shock. As expected, the surgery was intense and faced many challenges. From the very first step, blood gushed out like a stream, so quickly that even the most experienced doctors were stunned. Due to the massive blood loss, Xiaoyan's blood pressure and heart rate immediately dropped to the lowest levels. Thanks to the doctor's experience, calmness, decisiveness, courage, and meticulousness, Xiaoyan miraculously survived many life-threatening moments. After more than 9 hours, the surgery was a great success, with over 90% of the massive tumor on her face removed, weighing up to 2 kilograms. After stitching, her face was reduced to half its previous size. Her eyeballs returned to their normal position. Her nasal cavity allowed her to breathe more easily, and she could eat normally through her mouth. The only drawback was that her eyes remained blind because the treatment had come too late. The tumor had grown in the area of her optic nerves, compressing them and causing permanent blindness. After his daughter recovered, Mr. Wu finally told her the news of her mother's death. To everyone's surprise, the 22-year-old girl didn't cry but calmly accepted the news, perhaps because she had grown more mature after the life-and-death surgery. Over the next 6 months, Xiaoyan underwent 2 more surgeries, mainly to reconstruct her face to make it as normal as possible. Xiaoyan felt very proud because from now on, she could bravely go outside without having to cover her head with a scarf like before. After she recovered and returned to her hometown, everyone came to visit and encourage her. Charitable organizations and government agencies frequently visited and brought her gifts. Notably, Xiaoyan even found a job doing handicraft work, earning a few dozen yuan each month. In 2012, she went back to the hospital for a follow-up examination, where the doctors gave her a scarf as a gift. Everyone encouraged her and hoped that she would soon find a good man to marry. While she longed for love, she felt hesitant, believing that her blindness would make it unlikely for anyone to want to marry her. In November 2017, Xiaoyan's relatives introduced her to a man named Eerie. He was 11 years older than her and had previously suffered from polio, making it difficult for him to walk. Perhaps because both had experienced great hardships, they found many things in common and got along very well. Although Xiaoyan couldn't see Yi's face, she could feel the care and attention he gave her. Xiaoyan felt that although her boyfriend was much older, age didn't matter as long as he treated her well. In October 2018, Xiaoyan went for a follow-up examination at the hospital, accompanied by her boyfriend. She also brought many gifts for the medical staff at the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital. They were the ones who gave her a new life, allowing her to reintegrate into society with a new appearance. The doctors told her that as she aged, the tumor would grow more slowly until it eventually stopped developing. Although the tumor wouldn't metastasize, there was still a risk of recurrence, so she would need to visit the hospital for checkups 3 to 5 times a year. Currently, Xiaoyan and Eerie are married and have a child together. The story of the horse-faced girl, who had to cover her head with a scarf for 13 years whenever she went outside, ends here. Case 10. Nancy Marie Benelak was born in Grass Valley, California. She spent her childhood years in the School of Hennessy, later moving on to Nevada Union High School, where she excelled in athletics. She played softball and handled the role of song leader during her school songs and other festivities. Bowling was her leisure activity of choice, and she loved practicing this hobby with friends and family alike. Even though her figure was relatively slender, Nancy had quite a fierce appetite, according to her sister Linda Cox. After graduating from beauty school, Benelak started working at a beauty center situated on South Auburn Street. A friend of hers persuaded her to come with her on a trip to Hawaii. There, she found employment at another beauty salon before returning to California, where she secured a position as a court reporter. If only she knew the gruesome horror that awaited her upon her return. On the night of October 25, 1970, Nancy and her fiancé, Ferris Salami, returned to her apartment after a social outing. After spending time with Nancy, her fiancé went home later that same evening. In the few days preceding her untimely passing, Benelak spent the majority of her time with her fiancé, Ferris Salami, who was chief public defender. In fact, the two were planning to marry within weeks of that evening. According to what Salami told detectives, Nancy was lying in bed when he said goodbye to her at approximately 11:30 p.m. Before heading off to his own home, Ferris stated that Nancy always left the sliding door to the nearby balcony slightly open to allow her cat to go in and out if it ever felt like going outside. The following day, her coworkers noticed that Nancy had failed to show up to work. Linda Cox, Nancy's sister, was among the first people to suspect something was wrong. This was shortly after she received a call from the place Nancy worked at, letting her know she didn't show up that day and asking if everything was okay. Linda quickly called up a few of her friends who lived next to Nancy's home and asked them to check if Nancy's car was still in the parking lot, and they let her know that it was. Shortly afterward, one of Nancy's coworkers called her son, Jack, and asked him to check up on her. With the assistance of the apartment manager, they entered her residence. They found Nancy dead with stab marks. Upon arriving at the scene, deputies discovered that this case had many parallels to Judith Hikari's murder, which occurred earlier that year. Both women were nearly the same age and resided less than a mile away from each other. Furthermore, they were both getting married soon. Other than that, deputies weren't able to find anything else linking the two cases together. Following Nancy's murder, the sheriff's office interviewed over 500 potential suspects. Among those were Richard John Davis and a roommate of his, but both provided strong alibis for one another. Davis, who lived across the apartment complex from where the crime took place, was 27 years old at the time and had a history of being an unstable alcoholic who was prone to violence. Still, investigators didn't have a strong reason to suspect Davis, as the evidence led them to believe that the attacker must have gotten into a car and driven away from the area after killing Benelak, which indicated the man was, most likely, an outsider to the neighborhood. While this was happening, crime scene investigators were working hard to determine what exactly transpired on that fateful night. It was later theorized that during the evening of October 25th or early morning hours of the 26th, a male, likely suspect, entered Nancy's apartment by climbing up to the second-story balcony and through the open slider. The man clambered over the balcony with duct tape on his fingers to hide his fingerprints before breaking into Nancy's residence. To accomplish this, the killer had to be agile, which meant the culprit must have been young, most likely under the age of 30. Furthermore, an ominous trail of crimson-red blood was found running from the balcony, across the sidewalk, and ending in the parking lot. This led investigators to believe that the suspect may have left with a knife wound, since the blood trail leading out of Nancy's apartment indicated a cut, most likely sustained on either the hand or arm. Although crime scene investigation methods have vastly improved since 1970, back then, technological limitations hindered what investigators could learn from examining a crime scene. For example, while analysts could identify someone's blood type, sadly, that was about the extent of it. In 2004, almost 40 years after Benelak was killed, a new ray of hope emerged. Investigators were able to develop a DNA profile using samples from Nancy's apartment. For many years afterward, law enforcement ran the offender's DNA through state and national databases on a weekly basis. Unfortunately, all attempts proved rather pointless, as the suspect either seemed to have given up his life of crime after his latest murder, or somehow managed to avoid being caught while staying under the radar for decades. In a semblance of hope, Nancy's family had soon begun to vanish once more. Then, a year later, in 2005, homicide detective Mickey Lynx began looking for Nancy's killer. Mickey would go on to retire a few years after, but continued to follow the case closely nonetheless. In 2019, she rejoined the investigation as a volunteer, determined to help Nancy's family find comfort and bring her murderer to justice. Then, in November 2019, the Sheriff's Office and District Attorney's Office launched a forensic genetic genealogy investigation. They uploaded a DNA profile onto the open-source genealogy website in an effort to hopefully find people who might be related to the suspect and narrow their search until an ideal match was found. Eventually, a source for the DNA was found, although it did not belong to anyone on the database. Police also began collecting DNA samples from all the likely suspects or their closest relatives, hoping to find a match that would put Nancy's case to rest once and for all. Among those who provided DNA samples was Davis's own daughter. During the search efforts, it would seem Lynx managed to get in touch with Davis's roommate. The roommate couldn't remember how he'd met Davis or why he moved in to live with him, but he did recall that Davis had gotten a divorce at the time, and that the woman Davis was married to later gave birth to a baby girl. Davis never made any effort to connect with his daughter later on, nor did he provide for her whilst growing up. Detective Lynx sought out and eventually met with said daughter, who was in her 50s at the time. Davis's daughter agreed to help out by giving investigators her DNA upon hearing Nancy's case. On the 13th of June, 2022, which coincided with Nancy's birthday, her sister Linda received a phone call from Mickey that would change everything. Lynx had received a sample of DNA matching that of Richard Davis from the laboratory. She followed up with the original murder casebook. With no initial, middle, or birth date attached to go by, she needed more information to solve the case. However, after finding an old listing that stated that Richard Davis was, in fact, a former resident of the same apartment complex where Nancy was murdered, all the puzzle pieces began falling into place. By running samples of the daughter's DNA against blood samples taken the night of Nancy's murder, Lynx was both shocked and relieved to find that it was a match. The truth was finally revealed. Detective Mickey Lynx's valiant efforts were what eventually led to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office announcement, the one where they revealed that, at the time, 27-year-old John Davis was, in fact, the man responsible for Nancy Benelak's murder. Davis had never truly fled the crime scene, as police investigators suspected. Rather, he'd been living close to where he'd committed his heinous crime for years. While the truth was finally out, unfortunately, it was bittersweet, as both Ferris Salami, Nancy's would-be betrothed, and Richard Davis, her killer, had died in 2004 and 1997, respectively, meaning that, sadly, there would be no closure for Ferris nor any punishment for Davis. Still, Nancy's sister, Linda, along with her husband, Tom, was relieved to have finally learned the truth. While Richard Davis's death as a result of alcoholism-related complications meant he never faced punishment for his crimes, at least it meant that Linda and Tom could, at last, begin the healing process together, and not have to worry about undergoing a long and arduous trial that may very well have taken years. The fact that Davis broke into Nancy's apartment on the night of the murder through the slightly open glass door and covered his fingers with tape suggests that Nancy's murder was, in all likelihood premeditated. Although Davis's motive was unknown, detectives speculated that he may have had romantic feelings for Nancy and killed her out of spite or anger upon hearing she was getting married. While Davis was later questioned by detectives alongside his roommate, it would seem that, luckily for him, none of them thought to check his arms for knife wounds. Had they done so, Davis would have likely spent the rest of his life behind bars. Furthermore, while Davis did have a reputation for being quick to anger, he still managed to avoid being added to the Cody's database. This was because he had no prior convictions except for a minor DUI charge. In a statement read by Sheriff spokesman, Lieutenant Rodney Grassman, Linda said her family was grateful to Lynx for never giving up on the investigation. She also mentioned that she had almost lost hope that the case would be solved. Linda, in a later written statement, mentioned how often she and her husband, Tom, have expressed their belief that Nancy would have loved their ranch, with all the animals roaming in the wide open spaces. They went on to state how much they were tormented by the reality of being unable to news of their children and grandchildren with Nancy, but were nonetheless happy that Nancy's soul was finally at peace.